Chapter 25. The moment Jiang Hao died, his companion beasts dissipated. The explosive scaled snake and the companion beast that had transformed into bone armor exploded, transforming into primordial energy that dissipated into the world. Li Xian didn't have as much time as Su Miantu to let his thoughts run wild. After finishing Jiang Hao, he charged at the skeleton general and shouted at Zhou Wen, "Zhou Wen, I'll attract his attention. Find an opportunity to deal him a fatal blow." "All right." Zhou Wen retreated. Just as the skeleton general was about to turn around to chase after him, Li Xian had already punched the skeleton horse's head. This was a punch that contained the strength of a black knight, but it only managed to make the skeleton horse's head tilt slightly as it staggered. "I swear to defend the city to the death." The skeleton general was enraged as the flames in its eyes flared. It let out a sorrowful roar as it charged at Li Xian with spear in hand. Li Xian relied on the strength of a black knight to barely hold his ground against the skeleton general, but he was completely suppressed. He had no means of retaliating. Zhou Wen circled the skeleton horse, preventing the skeleton general from having a chance to attack him head-on. From time to time, he would throw out Vigor Divine Fist, striking the horse's leg or body. It affected the skeleton horse's movements, giving Li Xian a chance to catch his breath. The two of them attacked the skeleton general together, but they were still in a state of chaos. "The skeleton general in-game doesn't seem this powerful?" Zhou Wen was somewhat puzzled. He was certain that the skeleton general in-game wasn't that strong. It wasn't just in terms of strength and speed. The most important difference was that the skeleton general in-game had a single attack pattern. It was obvious that it was an NPC in-game. As for the skeleton general in real life, it was clearly more intelligent and self-aware than the skeleton general in-game. Its combat experience was completely different as well. It was more like a general that had experienced hundreds of battles. Zhou Wen hadn't seen such a phenomenon on ordinary skeleton soldiers. Be it the skeleton soldiers in-game or in real life, they were all the same. There was no difference. What's going on? Zhou Wen was momentarily unable to figure it out. Bam! Li Xian was struck in the chest by the skeleton general's spear, sending him flying. He tumbled for about 8 meters before coming to a stop. This skeleton general is a little odd. It seems to be getting stronger. Li Xian crawled up from the ground and endured his injuries as he charged forward again. At the same time, he shouted. If it were an ordinary mortal stage being suffering such heavy injuries, they probably wouldn't be able to survive even with a legendary companion beast protecting them. However, Li Xian's invincible connate divine art was indeed powerful. He could still fight energetically. In the past, Zhou Wen had only heard of how powerful an epic primordial energy art was. Only after seeing it today did he realize how huge the difference was. The ascetic meditation he cultivated was the same as the invincible connate divine art. They were both primordial energy arts that focused on strengthening one's physique, but in comparison, the effects were far inferior. If he had suffered the same injuries as Li Xian, he probably wouldn't have been able to get up. Indeed, I still need to cultivate a top-notch primordial energy art. But where can I get one? This isn't like a primordial energy skill that can drop in-game. Zhou Wen was somewhat vexed. In the schools of the Earth Federation, especially in universities, there were many kinds of primordial energy arts taught, but at most, they were at the legendary stage. There wasn't even a single epic stage primordial energy art. Zhou Wen couldn't cultivate one of that level even if he wanted to. Bro, stop daydreaming. Quickly help me finish him off. Li Xian yelled as he was pursued by the skeleton general. His black armor was on the brink of shattering. However, Zhou Wen had no intention of helping. All he said was, "It's useless if I go up. My strength isn't enough to seriously injure him. I think it's best I flee." "Don't you have a weaponized companion beast?" Li Xian shouted. "I have a mortal companion beast. Although it augments my strength greatly, it's still ineffective against such a legendary stage-dimensional creature, Zhou explained. A mortal companion beast? Li Xian was instantly rendered speechless. The higher the level of a dimensional creature, the easier it was to condense dimensional crystals. The chances of producing a companion egg were also higher. Instead, it was very difficult for low-level dimensional creatures to produce companion eggs. Therefore, the monetary value of a mortal companion beast might be higher than his legendary Black Warrior companion beast. But at this moment, monetary value was useless. That's bad. Although my Black Warrior companion beast has a certain strength enhancement, its main enhancement is still in defense. Strength isn't its specialty. Damn it. If I had known this would happen, I should have learned a few primordial energy skills with sufficient destructive power, or incubated a legendary companion beast with strength, Li Xian said regretfully. If it wasn't for the black armor protecting you, you would have died countless times. It's useless even if you have a power-type legendary companion beast, Zhou said with a shake of his head. Li Xian no longer had the time to speak to Zhou. He was nearly stabbed in the thigh by the skeleton general. The Black Warrior companion beast couldn't increase its speed, so Li Xian was unable to dodge the skeleton general's bone spear. All he could do was rely on the black armor to withstand it. He looked tragic, as though he would be stabbed to death by the skeleton general at any moment. The skeleton horse was just too fast. Li Xian wasn't at the legendary stage, so he couldn't even escape. Zhou, I beg you. Save Brother Xian. Su Miantu struggled to get up as he pleaded loudly. At that moment, Su Miantu was no longer as ostentatious as before. Instead, he treated Zhou as his pillar of support. In his heart, Zhou was no longer the high school student from a small city. Just a mortal companion beast wasn't something the average person could possess. From his point of view, Zhou definitely had an extraordinary background. Furthermore, Zhou's previous performance made Su Miantu believe that he had the ability to save Li Xian if he was willing. Zhou pondered for a moment and said, "It's not completely impossible, but I don't know if it will work." "We have to give it a try," Su Miantu said. Zhou nodded slightly as he sized up the skeleton general. Inwardly, he was thinking about the battle he had with the skeleton general in-game. He had fought the skeleton general several times in-game, but it wasn't completely without results. From his observations, the skeleton general did have a weakness. However, Zhou wasn't sure if the skeleton general's weakness in-game existed in the skeleton general in reality. After all, the skeleton general in reality was a lot stronger. At this point in time, Zhou could only give it a try. Seeing Li Xian being pursued by the skeleton general, Zhou secretly circled to the skeleton general's left. As he gradually approached, he sought an opportunity. Without needing Zhou to say a word, Li Xian knew that he needed to create an opportunity for Zhou. When the skeleton general thrust its spear at him again, Li Xian gritted his teeth and wrapped the black armor around his left abdomen to withstand the strike. The bone spear's tip stabbed into the black armor, tearing apart Li Xian's muscles. Taking advantage of the moment the bone spear wasn't retracted, Li Xian grabbed it tightly with both hands. Chapter 26. Bam! Under the powerful impact of the Vigor Divine Fist and the Vigor Glove, the skeleton general's eye socket ruptured. Zhou's gloved fist smashed right into his eye socket as the blood-colored flames in his eye socket immediately splattered like blood. The skeleton general, who had been pulling the spear with all his might, suddenly came to a stop. In the next second, the bone spear fell to the ground, and all the bones in his body instantly scattered to the ground. Even the skeleton horse fell apart, turning into a pile of rotting bones. And in the skull that Zhou had smashed apart, there was a faint red glow. Zhou flipped the skull over and saw a red companion egg inside. It was the size of a goose egg and crystalline like jade. There seemed to be blood-colored flames burning within. A companion egg? Your luck isn't bad. Unfortunately, you are still at the mortal stage. Your primordial energy isn't enough to incubate a legendary companion egg. Furthermore, that skeleton general seems a little odd. It's best you don't randomly incubate it. Li Xian was covered in wounds, but regardless of their size, they were tightly sealed. No blood seeped out, clearly thanks to the invincible connate divine art. Don't you want it? Zhou asked Li Xian. Li Xian shook his head. If it weren't for you, Miantu and I would probably be dead. What's the point of having a companion egg? Besides, it's just a legendary companion egg. I really don't think much of it. Just take it. Zhou nodded and didn't stand on ceremony. He directly stored the skeleton general's companion egg into his pocket and glanced at Jiang Hao, who had died a violent death. He said, Jiang Hao's death isn't to be pitied, but with his death, our results will definitely be greatly affected. It will probably be difficult for us to enter a famous school. Li Xian laughed when he heard Zhou. Don't worry. When we get out, feel free to apply to any famous school you want. I guarantee you that you will be accepted. Su Miantu's injuries were very serious. Although Li Xian's injuries wouldn't worsen, they weren't light either. He similarly needed treatment. The trio didn't continue hunting the skeleton soldiers. After collecting all the bone beads, they returned and left Guide Ancient City. The invigilator verified the number of bone beads and dimensional crystals before taking Li Xian and Su Miantu away for treatment. Zhou took the bus home alone. On the way, he used his phone to enter the ancient Imperial City dungeon again. He wanted to verify if the skeleton general in-game was really weaker than the skeleton general in real life. Indeed, this isn't an illusion. The skeleton general in the game is indeed much weaker. It's no wonder I suspected that he wasn't a legendary creature. When Zhou met the skeleton general in-game again, he realized that he was much weaker than the skeleton general in real life. But even so, without Li Xian restraining him, Zhou could only contend with the skeleton general in-game with his strength alone. It would be very difficult to kill him. The blood-colored avatar under Zhou Wen's control had no chance of approaching the skeleton general's eye socket. However, Zhou Wen didn't mind. He continued using all his strength to control the blood-colored avatar to deal with the skeleton general. To Zhou Wen, since he already knew the skeleton general's weakness, it was only a matter of time before he killed him alone. All he needed to do was do his best. After returning home, Zhou Wen continued leading the same life as before. Apart from sleeping, he would game and grind dungeons even when he was eating or using the bathroom. With Zhou Wen's constant hard work, he finally killed the skeleton general once with perfect positioning. Although the skeleton general in-game didn't drop a companion egg, it still gave Zhou Wen a pleasant surprise. It dropped a 13-valued speed crystal. After absorbing the 13-valued speed crystal, Zhou Wen immediately felt an electric current flow into his body as though he was being electrocuted. It made him feel like he was floating. After a while, the feeling gradually vanished. When Zhou Wen looked at the stats in-game again, he was slightly taken aback. He had absorbed a 13-valued speed crystal. Logically speaking, his speed should have risen to 13, but now, his speed was only 9. It was much lower than he imagined. After some thought, Zhou Wen roughly understood why this was the case. Teacher once taught me that although absorbing a legendary crystal at the mortal stage has good effects, it isn't enough to raise one's physique to the legendary stage. Only by raising my primordial energy art to the next realm can I continue raising my physique by using legendary dimensional crystals. From the looks of it, that's the reason. Zhou Wen couldn't help but frown slightly when he thought of this. He originally wanted to use ascetic meditation to advance to the legendary stage, but after witnessing the might of the invincible connate divine art, it was clearly not a good choice to use ascetic meditation to advance to the legendary stage. But if I don't use ascetic meditation to advance to the legendary stage, where can I get an epic primordial energy art? Zhou Wen was momentarily at a loss for a solution. A few days later, the results of the college entrance examination were announced. Zhou Wen's scores were among the best, and his combat test results were ranked second. He was only lower than Li Xian and ranked above Su Miantu. From the looks of it, it was as Li Xian had said. Jiang Hao's death didn't affect their combat test result. Just as he was thinking about this matter, his phone suddenly rang. Zhou Wen took out his phone to take a look and realized that it was an unknown number. After picking up the call, Li Xian's voice sounded. "Zhou Wen, have you seen the results of the college entrance examination? I should have given first place to you, but this first place is of special use to me. Therefore, I shamelessly took first place. I'll make it up to you in the future. We agreed on fourth place. It's already very good to get second place. Actually, I don't care what place I get as long as it doesn't affect the school I apply for," Zhou Wen said. "Let's not talk about that. Anyway, I owe you a favor. I'll definitely return it in the future." Li Xian paused before continuing. "I'll be studying at Sunset College in the future. Are you interested in coming to Sunset College? It's better to have more friends and take care of each other." Sunset College? Zhou Wen wore a thoughtful look. Sunset College was one of the famous schools in the League's East District. It was at least ranked in the top 10 of the East District. Furthermore, Sunset College had a dimensional zone. Sunset College students could enter it for combat during their college years, making it much better than the typical university. Entering Sunset College wasn't a bad choice. The only thing that worried Zhou Wen was that Sunset College was located in Luoyang City, and the Yin family was in Luoyang. Zhou Wen didn't wish to be too close to the Yin family, so he was hesitant about going to Sunset College. Li Xian tried his best to persuade Zhou Wen to go to Sunset College, but Zhou Wen only told him to consider it without directly agreeing. After hanging up, Zhou Wen recalled something. Jing had previously given him a USB drive, saying that it was from Zhou Lingfeng. Zhou Wen had been busy conquering the skeleton general for the past few days, so he had forgotten about the USB drive. He didn't even look at what was inside. Chapter 27. Zhou Wen was somewhat surprised. He had heard of the sun strafe art before. It was an epic cultivation technique that was in no way inferior to the invincible connate divine art. In comparison, the sun strafe art was even more precious. After all, the invincible connate divine art had harsh cultivation requirements, but the sun strafe art didn't have many requirements. As long as one was willing to put in the hard work, even someone with mediocre talent would have a certain level of success. Furthermore, the sun strafe art was a primordial energy art with strong offensive capabilities. It was much more popular than the invincible connate divine art that was mainly used to strengthen one's physique. However, according to what Zhou Wen knew, the sun strafe art was a primordial energy art unique to a bigwig in the League. Apart from the bigwig's descendants, no one else had a chance of obtaining the sun strafe art. Why does Dad have the sun strafe art? It's most likely obtained through the Yin family's influence, right? Zhou Wen guessed inwardly. Zhou Wen didn't reject the sun strafe art because of such a guess. Since Zhou Lingfeng had given it to him, even if he had borrowed the Yin family's influence, Zhou Lingfeng had to have paid the price. Since he had paid the price, Zhou Wen naturally had no reason to reject it. He couldn't let Zhou Lingfeng down. After all, apart from his living expenses, Zhou Lingfeng had only given him a limited number of things since he was young. He could count them on his fingers. At least he didn't forget about his son. Zhou Wen didn't immediately look at the sun strafe art. Instead, he switched off the computer, pulled out the USB drive, and prepared to get something to eat. Cultivating a primordial energy art wasn't something that could be done overnight. Even if he already had a foundation of 9 primordial energy and cultivating other primordial energy arts was faster, it wasn't something that could be mastered in half a month. There was no need to rush it. When he opened the refrigerator, he realized that there was nothing left inside. Looking at the cardboard box in the corner of the living room, There wasn't even a packet of instant noodles inside. Zhou hesitated for a moment and gave up on ordering takeout. He washed his face, changed his clothes, and prepared to head out to get something to eat. He also planned on buying some food. At 8 or 9 in the evening, there were very few pedestrians on the street. When he was young, Zhou had heard from his grandfather that before the dimensional storms, even a small city like Guide City would be brightly lit in the middle of the night. Nowadays, such scenes were rare. The street lights were a little dim, making Zhou feel uncomfortable. His anemia seemed to be worsening. During this period of time, he had consumed too much blood. Fortunately, he was young enough and his body was strong enough. If he was an old man, his body's hematopoietic function would definitely not be able to keep up with the blood consumption. I'll buy some brown sugar at the supermarket later. I'll boil some brown sugar water to drink. I hope it'll be useful, Zhou muttered to himself. He also knew that it wouldn't be of much use. Even if he went to the hospital to see a doctor, it wouldn't solve his actual problem. To truly resolve the problem of excessive blood loss, there was only one way: to reduce the blood-colored avatar's death in-game. As long as the blood-colored avatar didn't die, he wouldn't have to waste his blood. Cough, cough. As Zhou walked, he heard a man cough in front of him. He looked up and saw an old man walking over with a hunched back. He had his head lowered and one hand was placed in front of his mouth as he coughed from time to time. Zhou thought nothing of it and continued walking forward. However, to his surprise, the elder fell to the ground with a plop when he was less than 3 meters away from him. "Uncle, are you all right?" Zhou walked over to check on the elder. The elder seemed incorporeal as he sat on the ground, unable to get up. He said weakly, "I'm fine. It's just that I'm old and have more illnesses. I'm useless. I'll be fine after some rest." "Then let me help you to the side." Zhou saw a bus stop not far away. There were benches for passengers to rest on while waiting for the bus. The elder nodded. Zhou reached out to hold his arm and helped him sit on the bench. Zhou habitually sized up the elder. He looked to be in his 70s or 80s. His hair was gray and his face was covered in wrinkles. However, from his thin cheeks and facial features, he was likely a handsome man when he was young. Zhou felt some pity for him. An elder of his age was considered the most tragic generation. When the dimensional storm subsided, it caused huge chaos. Those 10 years were the most chaotic and darkest period in human history. And the source of this chaos wasn't the terrifying dimensional creatures, but humans themselves. Most dimensional creatures were unable to rush out of the dimensional zones. Therefore, apart from the regions that were originally invaded by the dimensional zones, humans in other regions weren't in too much danger. However, when humans discovered that they could use dimensional crystals to become superhumans, many humans who had obtained strength revealed the darkest and most terrifying side of humans. In that turbulent and dark era, there were many demons and ambitious people who made people tremble in fear. Humans killed each other, and it could be described as a bloodbath. At the elder's age, he had lived through that dark era. His age had already exceeded the golden age of cultivation. Furthermore, that era didn't have such stable education and resources. Most men of his age didn't cultivate much. Even if they did, their achievements would be very limited. Not dying in that dark and chaotic era and being lucky to live to this day wasn't something to be happy about. This was because humans who cultivated from a young age not only had strong immunity and were rarely sick, but they also aged relatively slowly. Their lifespans were extended to a certain extent, far from what the elders of that era could compare with. Now, many humans in their 40s or 50s looked like they were in their 20s or 30s. Even if they grew old in the future and reached the elder's age, they wouldn't be as weak and sickly as the elder. "Uncle, if there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first." Zhou prepared to leave when he saw that the elder's condition had improved. "Young man, it's fate that we met. Can you accompany me for a chat?" The elder looked at Zhou with his turbid eyes as he said weakly, I don't know how to chat. Zhou wasn't rejecting the elder, but he really didn't know how to chat. It's fine. Let me ask you a few questions. The elder revealed a smile, but he immediately coughed again. Go ahead, Zhou said as he stood in front of the bench. He usually gamed and seldom interacted with others. Having someone willing to chat with him didn't seem like a bad thing. Of course, the premise was that the elder's question wasn't too difficult for Zhou to answer. Chapter 28. Zhou was still a proper virgin. He had never even been in a relationship before. Furthermore, he had always been focused on cultivation, so he really hadn't thought about this problem. The elder's question was somewhat odd, but Zhou thought about it seriously and said, Women with small breasts. The elder was delighted when he heard that. He said with a smile, I knew it. Women with small breasts are the best. Women with large breasts are like cows. What's there to look at? Only those babies who haven't weaned off their mothers will like cows. Although Zhou didn't agree with the elder's words, he had no intention of refuting him. The reason he chose women with small breasts was because large breasts weren't suitable for combat. It would affect one's sense of balance. Young man, let me ask you again. Do you like gentle women who are obedient, or do you like fierce and unreasonable women? Speaking of women, the old man's complexion seemed to be much better, and he continued to ask in high spirits. Zhou thought to himself, this elder sure is odd. Is there something wrong with his head? Who wouldn't like gentle women who are obedient, but would like an unreasonable shrew? Zhou originally wanted to answer that he liked gentle women, but he realized that if he continued, the elder's interest would be piqued. He was afraid that he would continue asking questions, and Zhou had no interest in continuing the conversation with the elder. I like women who are unreasonable. Zhou swallowed the words he was about to say and said against his will. To his surprise, just as Zhou said that, the elder slapped his thigh and said excitedly, Not bad, not bad. Women who are unreasonable are cute and interesting. Those obedient women are like dead fish. What's so fun about them? I never expected you to have such a good eye for women at such a young age. The elder had the intention of treating Zhou as a confidant. It left Zhou dumbfounded and speechless for a long time. He's indeed a lunatic. Zhou increasingly felt that there was something wrong with the elder's mind. Otherwise, how could he say such crazy things? If Zhou had his way, he definitely wouldn't have chosen such an unreasonable shrew. Uncle, where do you live? Do you need me to send you back? Zhou really didn't wish to delay any further. All he wanted was to quickly send the elder away and find a place to have a meal before returning to game. The elder ignored Zhou and continued, Lad, you have such a good eye for women. You are a talent, but you don't look very well, and you don't seem to be in good health. The body is the capital to pick up girls. If you don't have a good body, no matter how good your taste is, you won't be able to. What's going on? You call that good taste? Zhou regretted agreeing to chat with the elder. As the elder spoke, he searched his body for a while and took out a tattered diary. He handed it to Zhou. I think you're a good lad. You're my type. There's a primordial energy art recorded in here. Cultivate according to it. It's good for your body. As long as you can master it, no matter how troublesome women you meet in the future, you will have the energy to deal with them. A dark cloud hung over Zhou's forehead. From the elder's words, it seemed like cultivating a primordial energy art was to deal with those unreasonable women. Uncle, I appreciate your kindness, but I've already cultivated in a primordial energy art. I don't need to cultivate in another one. Zhou already had the sun strafe art, so he naturally wasn't interested in other primordial energy arts. Furthermore, he didn't believe that the elder's primordial energy art was of a high level. The elder glared at Zhou and said disdainfully, although this Skyphene solution isn't considered a top-notch primordial energy art, It's not something your crappy primordial energy art can compare to. A trash primordial energy art like ascetic meditation is meant for trash to cultivate. A young man with good taste like you shouldn't cultivate in such a trashy primordial energy art. How do you know that I cultivate in ascetic meditation? Zhouwen was alarmed. The elder curled his lips and said, although you don't look good, your skin and flesh have a luster that's as yellow as jade. There's spirit in your eyes and your bones are thick. Clearly, you have cultivated in ascetic meditation. However, you've only just grasped it. Thankfully, you've only just grasped it. If you were to continue cultivating in such a trashy primordial energy art, it would only waste your youth and ruin your life. Zhouwen sized up the elder. He really couldn't tell that the sickly elder had such good taste. The elder seemed to read Zhouwen's mind. Don't just stand there. This Skyfiend solution is 1,000 times better than ascetic meditation. It's stronger than any epic primordial energy art in the world. As long as you cultivate it well, you will definitely achieve something in the future. Although you won't be invincible, it won't be difficult for you to advance to the epic stage. Thank you, Elder. We met by chance, so it's not nice for me to accept such an expensive gift from you. Thank you for your kind intentions. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving. Zhouwen didn't know if the Skyfiend solution the elder mentioned was real. He had never heard of such an epic primordial energy art. Ignoring the fact that the Skyfiend solution wasn't an epic primordial energy art, even if it was, Zhouwen already had the Sun Strafe art. There was no need for him to cultivate in a Skyfiend solution of unknown origins. With that said, Zhouwen turned around and prepared to leave. The elder was odd, and he didn't wish to invite too much trouble. It was best he left early. Stop right there. Just as Zhouwen turned around, he heard the elder's cold bellow. Zhouwen ignored the elder and wanted to leave, but just as he took a step forward, he felt as though his body had been grabbed by an invisible hand. He was forcefully pulled back and turned to face the elder. The elder's turbid eyes shimmered with a terrifying glint like two light bulbs. He sat on the bench, coughing softly with his palm covering his mouth. However, Zhouwen's body seemed to be pulled by a huge hand. All he could do was stand in front of the elder, unable to move no matter how he struggled. I, Jing Daoxian, have lived for decades, but no one has ever lived to say no to me, the elder said coldly as he stared at Zhouwen. When Zhouwen heard the words Jing Daoxian, he first found it familiar. When he connected the three words to the meaning they represented in his memories, his expression changed drastically. Before the dimensional storms, the period before the League government was established was one of the most chaotic periods in human history. During that period, many murderous devils appeared. Among them, the most terrifying and ferocious one was named Jing Daoxian. The legend of Jing Daoxian's brutality was enough for a novelist to write a 10-million-word tome, but it might not be able to record it all. Chapter 29. Many League history books referred to that battle as the Day of Fiendish Calamity, and Jing Daoxian also had the nickname of Demon King. In that era, the League didn't have as many epic experts as it did now. To kill 27 epic experts in a row, nearly slaughtering more than half of humanity's experts, causing humanity's strength to regress by at least a decade. Zhouwen stared at the elder in front of him, unable to connect the sickly elder with the legendary man who was like a terrifying demon king. You are Demon King Jing Daoxian? Zhouwen didn't feel any fear because his body was restrained, because he knew very well that fear was useless. Are you willing to take it now? Jing Daoxian said to Zhouwen with a faint smile. Yes, Zhouwen answered without any hesitation. He didn't wish to die at the hands of this devil. When Jing Daoxian heard Zhouwen's answer, he narrowed his eyes and said, You say you want it, but you don't. Even if you take it, I'm afraid you won't cultivate it. Is this fellow sick? Zhouwen thought to himself, Of course I won't cultivate it. If that Skyfiend insight is really a primordial energy art of a devil like you, Wouldn't the League government think that I'm related to you if I were to cultivate it? Wouldn't they put me on the wanted list as well? Jing Daoxian pondered for a moment before his eyes lit up as though he had thought of something. He put away the notebook in his hand and took out something else. It was a purple metal box that resembled purple copper, but it didn't have a luster like purple copper. It had a dull, frosted texture. The metal box was squarish and about the size of a cigarette case. It looked extremely exquisite and exquisite. On the box there were strange and chaotic patterns engraved on it. In the middle were 3 words, Lost Immortal Sutra. Zhou recognized the 3 words, but he didn't know what they meant. The elder placed the small purple metal box in front of Zhou and used his fingers to lift the top lid. At that moment, Zhou realized that it wasn't a box at all, but purple metal pieces that were connected together. They looked like purple metal name cards. The purple metal pieces were very thin. There were 13 of them, and each one was engraved with tiny words. As the words were too small, Zhou couldn't see what was written on them. Jing Daoxian opened the purple metal piece, but he didn't read the words on it. He only waved it in front of Zhou before folding it back together, turning it into a purple metal piece the size of a cigarette case. Then, he placed it in Zhou hand. This records a primordial energy art. It's very interesting. Take it back and slowly cultivate it. Jing Daoxian gave a strange smile, revealing his white teeth. Jing Daoxian stuffed the Lost Immortal Sutra into Zhou hand before hunching his body and coughing lightly. He walked off the long street and soon disappeared into the dark street. Only then did Zhou feel the invisible force dissipate as he regained control of his body. He glanced in the direction where Jing Daoxian had vanished and couldn't see him anymore. He hurriedly looked down at the metal piece in his heart. The history books say that Jing Daoxian has an eccentric personality and does things according to his whims. It's true from what I've seen today. Legend had it that Jing Daoxian was temperamental. Killing was as simple as eating and drinking. He didn't have any morals at all. Zhou didn't believe that Jing Daoxian would be so kind as to give him a high-level primordial energy art after meeting him by chance. Zhou flipped the metal piece over and over again, but he didn't find anything special about it. Without opening it, it looked like a metal cigarette case. After some thought, Zhou didn't open the Lost Immortal Sutra's contents. He had the mysterious phone and the sun strafe art. He was destined to become an expert, so there was no need for him to take the risk to cultivate the primordial energy art Jing Daoxian had given him. After hesitating for a moment while holding the metal piece, Zhou carefully put it into his pocket. Firstly, he was afraid that Jing Daoxian was still spying nearby. If he were to throw it away now, Jing Daoxian might fly into a rage and kill him to vent his anger. Secondly, Zhou didn't know if there were any traps in the Lost Immortal Sutra that could harm others. If he randomly threw it away, he might end up harming others. After taking another look in the direction Jing Daoxian had vanished in, Zhou turned around and continued walking towards the supermarket. Just as Zhou turned to leave, the corners of Jing Daoxian's mouth curled up slightly as he sneered with a strange expression. I originally found you pleasing to the eye and gave you an opportunity, but I never expected you to be a layman. No one can live comfortably in this world after rejecting me, Jing Daoxian. Cultivating the Lost Immortal Sutra means death, but not cultivating it also means death. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for not knowing what's good for you. Suddenly, Jing Daoxian frowned slightly. He caught up so quickly? With that said, Jing Daoxian walked to the other end of the city and quickly vanished into the city's night. Zhou hadn't walked far when he suddenly saw a few people running over on the street in front of him. They were wearing black uniforms that looked like police uniforms, but they were somewhat different. Zhou sized them up carefully, but he didn't recognize them. There were men and women in the group, and most of them looked to be in their 20s or 30s. Leading them was a man in his 30s. His face was fair, but he had a mustache above his lips. He was thin, and the tip of his nose was slightly hooked. His eyes were as sharp as a knife. "Classmate, did you see an elder in his 70s or 80s when you came over from the front?" The group of people ran past Zhou, but none of them looked at him. However, not long after they ran, the man in the lead suddenly stopped and turned around to look at Zhou. "There seems to be such an elder. He went that way." Zhou pointed in the direction Jing Daoxian had left in. The man looked at Zhou again before nodding and thanking him. Then, he led the group of uniformed men and women in the direction Zhou had pointed in. Zhou waited until they were far away before turning to leave. He really didn't wish to be embroiled in such trouble. Peacefully attending school and gaming was the life he pursued. This time, he finally arrived at the supermarket successfully. After buying enough food, Zhou returned home as usual and continued his grinding in-game life. After playing until past 1 in the morning, Zhou forced himself to put down his phone and lay in bed to sleep. Zhou's sleep quality had always been good. Perhaps it had something to do with his talent. Zhou could quickly get into a groove when he was studying, and it was also very easy for him to fall asleep when he slept. He would fall asleep in less than 3 seconds after lying in bed. Zhou originally imagined that he would sleep until dawn like before, but he felt something amiss when he slept in the middle of the night. Chapter 30. Thump, thump. Zhou felt his heart beat like a drum. Furthermore, it was beating faster and faster, making him feel as though his heart was about to pop out of his chest. Could it be that I've lost too much blood recently, causing my heart to malfunction? Zhou had never had such an experience. He wanted to open his eyes and sit up to make his body feel better. However, Zhou failed to open his eyes, nor could he sit up. He couldn't even move his fingers. It felt like he was trying to get up to pee in his sleep, but he couldn't get up. What's going on? An ominous feeling arose in Zhou's heart. He was certain that he wasn't dreaming. His mind was extremely clear. What made Zhou feel even worse was that something seemed to be pressing down on his body. It was getting heavier and heavier, making his chest feel stuffy. He was almost out of breath. Even so, Zhou still couldn't open his eyes or move. It was as though he couldn't wake up from his dream. Could it be that I've encountered the ghost pressure that Grandpa told me when I was young? Zhou thought to himself. As Zhou's father was very busy with work and he didn't have a mother, Zhou's grandfather had taken care of him when he was young. In the past, his grandfather would tell him stories to coax him to sleep every night. As for his grandfather's stories, they were mostly ghost stories. Perhaps one of them was the story of the mysterious phone. However, Zhou was too young back then, so he didn't remember most of the stories. There were only a few especially terrifying ghost stories that left a deep impression on Zhou. He couldn't forget them even now. One of them was the ghost pressure. Zhou felt that his present state was very similar to the ghost pressure that his grandfather had mentioned. His mind was very clear, but he couldn't wake up or move his body. His body felt like it was being pressed down by something heavy as his heart raced. It made Zhou feel extremely uncomfortable. He wanted to vomit, but he couldn't vomit. This feeling lasted from midnight to 6 in the morning before Zhou suddenly regained control of his body. He immediately sat up in bed, ran to the bathroom, and vomited into the toilet. Zhou felt like he was about to vomit his bile. He still felt a little uncomfortable. What's going on? It shouldn't be as simple as having a stomachache, right? Zhou suddenly recalled his encounter with Jing Daoxian last night and couldn't help but be alarmed. Could it be related to Jing Daoxian? Zhou washed his face and turned to the living room. He took out the stack of purple metal cards he had hidden in the drawer. The metal card didn't change at all. The words, Lost Immortal Sutra, were clearly engraved on the metal card. Jing Daoxian is temperamental. I previously rejected him. He definitely doesn't have any good intentions in giving me the Lost Immortal Sutra. Perhaps the problem lies on the metal card. Could it be poison? Zhou suspected that Jing Daoxian had drugged the purple metal card with hallucinogenic drugs that could seep through the skin and affect the human body. The school had taught such general knowledge, and Zhou Wenxue was pretty good at it. He used pliers to place the purple metal card in a glass container and did some simple tests, but he didn't discover any toxic reactions. There's no poison on it? Or could it be that the composition of the poison is rather special and can't be detected by ordinary methods? Zhou frowned slightly. After a while, Zhou felt that his body had returned to normal. His heartbeat slowed down and he no longer felt like vomiting. Zhou suspected that it was really just a stomach ache. After taking some diarrhea medicine that he had prepared at home, his body seemed to return to normal. There were no other abnormalities. As he paid attention to his body, he gamed and grinded. Now, Zhou had the ability to kill the skeleton general alone in-game. However, it took him a little longer. It took him nearly an hour to kill the skeleton general once. The second time he killed the skeleton general alone in-game, nothing dropped. It left Zhou somewhat disappointed. Zhou didn't wish to waste his blood to reopen the ancient Imperial City dungeon. All he could do was control the blood-colored avatar to continue exploring the depths of the ancient city. The ancient buildings were connected like a gigantic demonic palace. Zhou had the intention of entering the ancient buildings to take a look, but he was afraid that he would waste his blood if he died. The deeper they went into the ancient Imperial City, the more skeleton soldiers they encountered. Towards the end, the skeleton soldiers on the streets surged forward like a tidal wave. There was no end to them no matter how many they killed. However, the skeleton general never appeared again. After battling into the night, the streets were still filled with an endless sea of skeletons. Zhou had no choice but to control the blood-colored avatar to storm out and quit the game. He hadn't had a good rest last night, so he was a little exhausted. He wanted to rest early and rejuvenate himself to continue fighting tomorrow. Lying in bed, it didn't take long for Zhou to fall asleep. However, not long after he fell asleep, Zhou woke up again. The experience of being pinned down by the ghost from last night had befallen him once again. His heart pounded as though something heavy was pressing down on him. It made Zhou feel extremely uncomfortable. Damn it. This definitely isn't as simple as having a stomach ache. It must be Jing Daoxian's doing. Zhou had the urge to curse. He didn't have any grudge with Jing Daoxian. It was only because he had rejected the Skyfiend insight that Jing Daoxian had given him that Jing Daoxian had made him suffer. It was truly infuriating. After a bitter night, the feeling of being pinned down vanished at daybreak. It was about the same time as yesterday. Only then did Zhou regain control of his body. Zhou got up again and rushed to the bathroom. This time, he vomited more than yesterday. He felt like he was about to vomit his stomach out. Just like yesterday, the discomfort quickly vanished. If it wasn't for the excruciating pain and the fact that the vomit hadn't been flushed down his throat, Zhou would have suspected that the discomfort from before was just an illusion. Zhou was now certain that there was definitely something wrong with his body. Furthermore, there was a high chance that Jing Daoxian had done something to him. It was clearly unrealistic to seek out Jing Daoxian now. The entire Earth Federation had placed a bounty on Jing Daoxian's head for decades, but they had failed to capture him. It was too difficult to find a high school student like Zhou. Even if he was lucky and managed to find him, Zhou didn't believe that he had the strength to seek justice from Jing Daoxian. After pondering for a moment, Zhou took out the purple metal card with the Lost Immortal Sutra engraved on it again. This time, Zhou didn't hesitate as he flipped it open to read its content. Jing Daoxian had once told Zhou that there was an interesting primordial energy art recorded inside, and that he should practice it when he returned. Zhou guessed that the solution to his body's problems was in the Lost Immortal Sutra. Chapter 31. The 13 purple metal cards were connected together like a mini comic strip. After pulling them apart, he could see the contents on them. There were many tiny words engraved on both sides. Zhou began reading from the back of the first card. The opening was indeed the opening of the primordial energy art. It mentioned the human body's magnetic field and primordial energy, etc. As he read, Zhou suddenly felt hungry. He recalled that among the food he had bought yesterday, there was his favorite salted duck egg. Therefore, he put down the Lost Immortal Sutra, peeled a salted duck egg, and made a bowl of instant noodles. After Zhou finished eating, he returned to read the Lost Immortal Sutra again. He suddenly realized that he couldn't remember where he had read. Zhou frowned slightly. He was very confident in his memory. Although he didn't dare say that he had a photographic memory, as long as he had read and remembered the content, he wouldn't forget it even after 3 to 5 years. It had only been less than 10 minutes, and he had only read a few lines. It didn't make sense for him to forget where he had read. When he read the Lost Immortal Sutra from the beginning, Zhou was surprised to discover that it wasn't as simple as forgetting where he had read. He began reading from the beginning, but he realized that the content was unfamiliar, as though it was the first time he had seen it. He had forgotten everything he had read before. This thing is indeed odd. Zhou continued reading. After reading a few more lines of text, he felt a little hungry and wanted to eat something. As his mind wandered, he looked at the Lost Immortal Sutra again, only to realize that he had forgotten what he was looking at. When he looked back, the content he had previously read became unfamiliar again. He had forgotten all the content he had read. Zhou refused to believe it. He took out his phone and opened his notebook. He compared the contents on the purple metal card and wanted to copy the content. However, when Zhou memorized a line and turned to look at his phone, he realized that his mind was blank. He couldn't remember the line he had memorized at all. He attempted to memorize the Lost Immortal Sutra again, and soon, Zhou realized that he could clearly memorize the content of the Lost Immortal Sutra. However, as long as he looked away and wanted to record it down, he would forget it. Zhou tried to blindly memorize the Lost Immortal Sutra as he read it, but it was useless. As long as he was distracted, he would forget the content of the Lost Immortal Sutra. He wanted to use his phone to take a picture of the Lost Immortal Sutra, but after several attempts, the metal card he took a picture of was a flat purple without any engravings. This Lost Immortal Sutra is really odd. Not only can I not be distracted, but even if I concentrate, I will be affected by the text. I will be confused by my emotions and desires, thus being distracted. It's really odd. Zhou thought as he looked at the Lost Immortal Sutra engraved on the metal. Unbeknownst to Zhou, the Lost Immortal Sutra wasn't as simple as being strange. It might be a distraction in the beginning, but towards the end, it wasn't just a distraction. It could even kill him. In history, several epic experts had died from reading the Lost Immortal Sutra. Even if they were lucky enough not to die, they ended up going crazy like idiot. Even Jing Daoxian didn't finish reading the Lost Immortal Sutra after obtaining it. He closed it halfway, not daring to read any further. If it wasn't because the Lost Immortal Sutra had a magical connection with its host, preventing it from being forcefully abandoned, Jing Daoxian wouldn't have been willing to carry it with him. Even Jing Daoxian wasn't able to finish reading the Lost Immortal Sutra after receiving it. He closed it halfway, not daring to continue. If it wasn't for the magical connection between the Lost Immortal Sutra and its host, preventing him from forcefully abandoning it, Jing Daoxian wouldn't have been willing to carry it with him. If not for the Lost Immortal Sutra's influence, Jing Daoxian wouldn't have suffered in the dimensional zone and been severely injured. He had originally planned on finding an opportunity to dispose of the Lost Immortal Sutra. Not only did he want Zhou to cultivate it, but he also wanted him to suffer. He even wanted him to die a tragic death. Only then did he give the Lost Immortal Sutra to Zhou. This person's viciousness was not something an ordinary person could compare with. He was truly a devil. As the Lost Immortal Sutra was just too odd, Zhou didn't continue reading it. He still wanted to try and see if his body would suffer any problems if he distanced himself from the metal card and the Lost Immortal Sutra. In a hotel suite in Guide City, a few people were sitting around a table discussing something. If Zhou were here, he would definitely recognize them as the uniformed men and women he had met that night. We let that devil Jing Daoxian escape again. How hateful, a man said hatefully. It hadn't been easy for them to track down Jing Daoxian's tracks. Furthermore, he was heavily injured. It could be said to be their best opportunity, but they still failed to catch up to him. Jing Daoxian was so heavily injured. How did he break through our blockade and escape without anyone noticing? A woman asked in puzzlement. No matter how injured he is, he's Jing Daoxian after all. We were too careless. If we had immediately sealed off Guide City, we might have had a chance of finding him. Everyone engaged in a flurry of discussion, but the man sitting in the seat of honor remained silent. His fingers tapped the table rhythmically as his eyes drooped, as though he was in thought. Minister Qiao, what do you think? The blonde, green-eyed woman looked at the man with a flirtatious gaze as she asked coquettishly. When Qiao Siyuan heard the woman's question, he raised his eyelids slightly. His fingers stopped tapping as he swept his gaze across everyone's faces. How long did Jing Daoxian take from the moment he entered Guide City to the moment he left? Qiao Siyuan didn't answer the woman's question and instead asked a question. The woman switched on her tablet computer and looked at the information before saying, "A figure like Jing Daoxian has extremely powerful senses. Even cameras would find it difficult to capture his track. Thankfully, Guide City's Heavenly Eye system is rather complete. There are certain areas that are difficult to completely avoid being monitored by cameras. From the video we have obtained, Jing Daoxian entered Guide City at about 8:30 p.m. and left at about 9:20 p.m. He stayed in Guide City for about 50 minutes. After Qiao Siyuan heard that, he picked up a pen and drew a red line on Guide City's map. This is the route we took to pursue Jing Daoxian. Based on the information we have, he was too heavily injured. Furthermore, he didn't use any transportation equipment, so his speed wasn't fast. According to the occasional images captured by the Sky's Eye system, that's indeed the case. Jing Daoxian didn't walk very fast. He only reached the vicinity of the square at around 8:55 a.m. The woman explained the details of the information. Then did any of you notice that the route from Xiangjuan Road to the Yangtze River intersection only takes up less than a 20th of the route he took in Guide City? Yet, he spent nearly 10 minutes here. Can you tell me why? Qiao Siyuan stared at everyone and asked. Perhaps his injuries relapsed and he needed time to tend to his injuries? A young man said. Qiao Siyuan said with a deadpan expression, "Do you still remember that we encountered a high school student along that route?" Chapter 32. Qiao Siyuan nodded slightly. That's right. It's him. Minister, do you think that youth is Jing Daoxian's accomplice? The blonde, green-eyed woman asked Qiao Siyuan. Qiao Siyuan stared at the map on the table and said, "No, he should be an ordinary high school student. However, since he saw Jing Daoxian during that period of time, perhaps we can use him to understand why Jing Daoxian stopped abnormally in the vicinity. Think of a way to find that high school student." Everyone looked at each other. They hadn't deliberately sized up a passerby youth. Furthermore, it was night time, and the youth didn't have any obvious physical characteristic. Now that they were being asked to search for him out of thin air, they were truly at a loss. I'll draw the youth's face for you. To be able to appear in that location at that time and wearing home clothes, he likely lives nearby. Check if the nearby cameras have captured him and find him as soon as possible, Qiao Siyuan said. Zhou held the Lost Immortal Sutra and originally wanted to place it somewhere far from home, but just as he walked out, he saw a car parked by the street. Li Xian was sitting in the car and waving at him. What's the matter? Zhouwen walked over and asked. Let's talk in the car. Li Xian opened the car door and moved inside, gesturing for Zhouwen to get in. Zhouwen thought for a moment before getting in. Li Xian closed the car door and rolled up the windows. Then, he switched on his phone and stuffed it into Zhouwen's hands. Take a look at this. Zhouwen looked at it suspiciously and realized that the screen was a picture of a document. As the words were too small, Zhouwen had no choice but to swipe the screen to enlarge the photo before he could see the contents of the document. The document seemed to be a draft of information. On it was written that a new dimensional zone had been discovered near Ancient Path. Furthermore, in that dimensional zone, a companion beast in the form of an organ had been discovered. Below it was some data and analysis report. What do you mean by showing me this? Zhouwen asked Li Xian in puzzlement. Li Xian said excitedly, Ancient Path is inside Sunset College. This newly discovered dimensional zone will belong to Sunset College in the future. So what? Zhouwen still didn't understand why Li Xian was so excited. So what? That means that in the future, Sunset College students will have a chance of entering newly discovered dimensional zones and obtaining companion beasts in the form of organs. Seeing that Zhouwen remained expressionless, Li Xian continued, companion beasts in the form of organs are extremely rare. You might not have heard of them, but I can responsibly tell you that they are much more precious than ordinary companion beasts. Let me put it this way. If your heart is destroyed by someone, or if you have a heart disease and are on the brink of death, if you have a heart-shaped companion beast, it can fuse with your heart and replace your original heart, making your heart function even stronger. It does sound useful. Zhouwen finally had a chance to speak after listening for a while. It's more than useful. Let me tell you, do you know how many elderly people in the Earth Federation die of heart disease every year? How many people died from internal tumors? Companion beasts in the form of organs could be sold for astronomical prices. Besides, even if you don't sell it and keep it for yourself, it would be equivalent to having an additional life when you venture into dimensional zones in the future. Li Xian rambled on for a long time before finally saying, that dimensional zone can produce companion beasts in the form of organs. In the future, these benefits will only be enjoyed by people from Sunset College. Don't hesitate. Follow me to Sunset College. It will be too late if you delay any longer. If this news officially gets out, top students from all over the country who want to enroll at Sunset College will swarm over. There definitely won't be enough admissions slots. Alright, I'll head back to enroll now. Zhouwen agreed without any hesitation. Although he wasn't willing to be too close to the Yin family, he wouldn't let it affect his normal life. Since there were so many benefits to enrolling at Sunset College, Zhouwen had no reason to give up, much less give up because of the Yin family. Fill out the application online and give me your identification card. Leave the rest to me, Li Xian hurriedly said. In fact, after Zhouwen obtained his college entrance examination results, all he needed to do was apply on Sunset College's official website and wait to be admitted. With Zhouwen's results, it wouldn't be a problem for him to be admitted under normal circumstances. However, things were different this time. Once the discovery of an organ companion beast was made public, the competition for spots would be intense. Zhouwen might not necessarily be admitted. Li Xian wanted Zhouwen's identification card and planned on using his connections to ensure that Zhouwen would definitely be admitted to Sunset College. Zhouwen didn't say anything else. After logging into the website with his phone to enroll, he handed his identification card to Li Xian. Alright, I'll be returning to Luoyang now. If there's nothing else at home, pack up and follow me to Luoyang. I'll take you to familiarize yourself with Luoyang and Sunset College's environment, Li Xian said as he took his identification card. Alright, wait a moment. Zhouwen got out of the car and returned to pack his things. What are you waiting for? I'll pack up with you. Li Xian got out of the car and followed Zhouwen home. Zhouwen didn't have much to pack, so after packing some daily necessities and clothes, He left Guide City with Li Xian. Guide City wasn't far from Luoyang. If it were before the dimensional storms, it would take about 3 to 4 hours to drive on the highway. However, there were many regions that had become dimensional zones. Taking a detour would take at least double the distance. It would take more than 10 hours to reach the destination. Li Xian originally wanted to chat with Zhou, but to his surprise, Zhou kept gaming on his phone the moment he got into the car. His eyes never left the phone screen, leaving Li Xian somewhat depressed. Is this fellow for real? How can he have such skills despite being so obsessed with games? Li Xian was very experienced in acting. He was even more experienced in playing the pig to eat the tiger. However, no matter how he looked at it, Zhou didn't look like he was faking it. Instead, he was truly engrossed in the game. Li Xian sat by the side and watched for a while. He saw that Zhou's phone game was extremely boring. It was all about constantly killing monsters and ants. Such repetitive and boring games had gone out of fashion decades ago. Zhou, is this game that fun? Li Xian asked as he found it boring after watching for a while. It's fun, Zhou said as he stared intently at the game. As he was afraid that Li Xian would notice something amiss, he didn't enter the ancient sovereign city dungeon. Instead, he grinded ant nest. Chapter 33. Li Xian found it boring, so he closed his eyes to circulate his primordial energy and began cultivating the invincible connate divine art. As for Zhou, he controlled the blood-colored avatar and stormed all the way to where the silver-winged flying ant was. Although he had the experience of killing the legendary skeleton general, he still found himself powerless against the silver-winged flying ant. He was killed in a few exchanges. This silver-winged flying ant seems to be harder to deal with than the skeleton general. It's faster and has the ability to fly. It doesn't have the limitations of the skeleton horse. Zhou frowned slightly. He originally believed that he had improved significantly during this period of time, allowing him to fend off the silver-winged flying ant, but he was still far from it. If I can incubate the skeleton general's companion egg and use the skeleton general's strength to fight the silver-winged flying ant, I should have a chance of killing it. Unfortunately, I don't have the invincible connate divine art. It's nearly impossible to incubate a legendary companion egg at the mortal stage. No matter how Zhou thought about it, he could only fuse Inch Punch and Vigor Divine Fist. However, he couldn't practice his punches while in the car. The game had reached a bottleneck and was difficult to overcome. There was no point in forcefully continuing the game. It would only be a waste of his blood. Seeing that Li Xian had entered a cultivation state and the driver in front couldn't see what was happening behind him, Zhou took out the Lost Immortal Sutra and planned on reading its contents. The Lost Immortal Sutra had the effect of bewitching one's mind. Even a terrifying expert like Jing Daoxian would find it difficult to finish reading it without being distracted. However, Zhou was different. The former principal of Guide High School had once said that no matter what Zhou did, he could be absolutely focused. This was the main reason why he was good at studying and cultivating quickly. Now, Zhou was completely focused on reading the Lost Immortal Sutra without any distractions. The bewitching text in the Lost Immortal Sutra failed to distract him. Now, Zhou was fully focused on reading the Lost Immortal Sutra's contents. His mind couldn't accommodate a second thought. Even though the Lost Immortal Sutra's text could bewitch immortals and Buddhas, it couldn't shake Zhou's mind. No one had been able to read the Lost Immortal Sutra from beginning to end, but Zhou read it word by word without any accidents. He was completely immersed in reading it page by page from beginning to end. Humans had emotions and desires, so they could be tempted by all sorts of factors. Even Buddha couldn't help but be tempted. It wasn't that there were no people in the world who could finish reading the Lost Immortal Sutra, but there were only a handful of them. There weren't many people like Zhou in the entire Earth Federation who could focus wholeheartedly once he decided on something. Even the epic bigwigs whose strength far exceeded Zhou Wen's found it difficult to be completely free of distracting thought. Even perfected immortals in the heavens would be bewitched. This was also one of the origins of the Lost Immortal Sutra's name. This time, Zhou Wen read from beginning to end without being confused by the power of the text. The Lost Immortal Sutra that no one had finished reading finally appeared in its entirety before Zhou Wen's eyes. When Zhou Wen finished reading the last word of the Lost Immortal Sutra, he suddenly felt his body tremble. At some point in time, the primordial energy in his body had automatically circulated. Having cultivated ascetic meditation for so many years, Zhou Wen's primordial energy should have automatically circulated according to ascetic meditation's route. However, this time, the primordial energy's circulation followed a strange path that Zhou Wen had never seen before. It flowed through his entire body and constantly circulated. According to what Zhou Wen knew, any primordial energy art should have a beginning and an end. Just like ascetic meditation, the starting point of ascetic meditation was the lower Dantian's sea of energy. When the primordial energy came out of the sea of energy, it would circulate through the meridians before finally returning to the sea of energy. The sea of energy was where the primordial energy was stored. Most primordial energy arts were the same. Some special primordial energy arts would open up a sea of energy in a very special location or multiple sea of energy. However, they ultimately had a place to store the primordial energy. Now, Zhou Wen's situation was somewhat odd. The primordial energy in his body kept circulating repeatedly, but there was no place to store the primordial energy. It was like a never-ending train that was traveling on a circular track. Zhou Wen was somewhat astonished as he attempted to circulate ascetic meditation, hoping to put the primordial energy that had lost control back on the right track. However, he soon realized that the ascetic meditation he had painstakingly cultivated for years was useless. The primordial energy didn't listen to his commands at all. Zhou Wen didn't panic because of this. He carefully sensed the trajectory of the primordial energy in his body and soon realized that the trajectory was clearly the circulation path of the Lost Immortal Sutra. I actually still remember the Lost Immortal Sutra? When Zhou Wen thought of the Lost Immortal Sutra, he was slightly taken aback. This was because he had long been distracted, but he still remembered it clearly. He could recall the entire Lost Immortal Sutra word by word. He didn't forget it like before. If the narrow-minded Jing Daoxian knew that not only had Zhou Wen not died after reading the Lost Immortal Sutra, but he had even gained a basic mastery of it, he would probably vomit blood from anger. Unable to stop his primordial energy from circulating, Zhou Wen could only take the risk to cultivate the Lost Immortal Sutra. Just as Zhou Wen began cultivating the Lost Immortal Sutra, the primordial energy in his body immediately began flowing in joy, resonating with the Lost Immortal Sutra. Zhou Wen originally only wanted to read through the Lost Immortal Sutra's contents, but to his surprise, he had already mastered it. He didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse. As Zhou Wen entered a cultivation state, he didn't realize that the 13 purple metal pieces had gradually turned to dust after he began circulating the Lost Immortal Sutra. They vanished before they even landed on the ground. After Zhou Wen cultivated the Lost Immortal Sutra, he discovered many oddities. Indeed, the Lost Immortal Sutra didn't have the concept of a sea of energy. Primordial energy constantly circulated in his body, just like the blood that flowed through his body in an endless cycle. When Zhou Wen circulated the Lost Immortal Sutra, he could only control the speed at which his primordial energy flowed, but he couldn't completely stop it. Even if Zhou Wen didn't circulate the Lost Immortal Sutra, his primordial energy would still slowly circulate along the Lost Immortal Sutra's pathways. With the circulation of the Lost Immortal Sutra, Zhou Wen felt his body suddenly lighten, as though the shackles on his body had been released. He felt indescribably relaxed. But apart from that, there was nothing special. He hadn't advanced to the legendary stage, and the lost Immortal Sutra was still slowly flowing on its own. Zhou realized that he didn't need to deliberately cultivate the lost Immortal Sutra. He opened his eyes and moved his body, but his primordial energy was still automatically circulating. Zhou's actions didn't affect it at all. I have no choice but to cultivate it this time. Zhou sighed inwardly, unsure if cultivating the lost Immortal Sutra was a blessing or a curse. There was no need to deliberately cultivate the lost Immortal Sutra, and with nothing else to do, Zhou took out the mysterious phone and used a needle hidden in his ring to prick his finger and drip a drop of blood onto the phone's screen. This time, Zhou wasn't in a rush to enter the game dungeon. He first took a look at his stats in-game. Zhou, 16 years old, life form level, mortal strength, 10 speed, 10 constitution, 10 primordial energy, 10 primordial energy art, lost Immortal Sutra primordial energy skill, vigor divine fist, skeleton palm. Chapter 34. Zhou was somewhat surprised. He hadn't advanced to the legendary stage, but all his stats had increased by 1, going from 9 to 10. This increase of 1 point left Zhou somewhat incredulous. This was because 9 points seemed to be the limit of the mortal stage. If he didn't advance to the legendary stage, absorbing a dimensional crystal above 10 points would be useless. This point had already been verified when he absorbed the level 13 speed crystal. The appearance of the lost Immortal Sutra had broken this restriction. What sort of primordial energy art is the lost Immortal Sutra? When Zhou thought of the lost Immortal Sutra, he realized that the 13 purple metal cards he had previously obtained had vanished at some point in time. Li Xian was still cultivating by the side. The driver in front was separated from the back by a bulletproof glass, so it was impossible for him to take away the lost Immortal Sutra. Zhou searched his entire body but failed to find the purple metal cards with the lost Immortal Sutra engraved on them. How odd. Zhou frowned slightly, unsure if the disappearance of the lost Immortal Sutra was a good or bad thing. However, since he couldn't find it, Zhou didn't press the issue. Seeing that Li Xian was still cultivating the invincible connate divine art, he continued gaming on his phone. However, killing ordinary vigor ants or mutated vigor ants was meaningless. After playing for a while, Zhou quit the game and leaned back to sleep with his eyes closed. The average person couldn't fall asleep just because they wanted to, but Zhou was different. As long as he wanted to sleep, he could quickly fall asleep at any time. Even if there was a mountain of blades or a sea of flames beside him, he could still sleep. This was also a kind of talent, and not just anyone could achieve it. The reason why Zhou was sleeping was because he wanted to know if he would still suffer from Ghost Crush after mastering the lost Immortal Sutra. Ba-dump, ba-dump. Not long after he fell asleep, Zhou felt his heart race again. His chest felt stuffy as though something was pressing down on it. Damn it, it's happening again. Zhou felt depressed. He had already cultivated the lost Immortal Sutra, but the abnormal phenomenon of Ghost Crush hadn't been resolved. Not only had it not been resolved, but it seemed to have worsened. Zhou vaguely heard a strange mumbling sound. It didn't sound human, but it also seemed extremely close. He couldn't tell what it was saying, but it sounded like the murmurs of a devil in hell. He was in a daze the entire way until Li Xian nudged him awake. Only then did he wake up from his abnormal state of being pinned down by ghosts. However, unlike the previous 2 times, Zhou didn't feel any discomfort or the urge to vomit. He only broke out into a cold sweat, and when the wind blew, he felt refreshed as though he was in a much better mood. Sunset College has a semi-closed management model. After we matriculate, we will have to stay on campus. Even I'm no exception. Before that, you can stay here with me. Li Xian got out of the car and led Zhou into a villa. After the dimensional storms, due to Luoyang's rich dimensional zone resources, it quickly became a rising first-tier city in the League's East District. This was also the most prosperous area in the city. It could be said that every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. Those who could live in villas here were definitely rich or respectable. Zhouwen wasn't surprised that Li Xian could stay here. What surprised him was that apart from Li Xian's chauffeur, there wasn't a single servant in the huge villa. "Don't tell me you're cleaning such a huge place by yourself?" Zhouwen asked as he sat on the sofa. "There were a few servants in the past, but they were all taken away by me. After all, there are some things that I don't want outsiders to know." Li Xian took out a can of drink from the fridge and threw it to Zhouwen. He continued with a smile, "Besides, I rarely come back. As a playboy, I naturally have to spend the night with prostitute. That's befitting of my status. As for you, just stay here. When school starts, I'll think of a way to get the school to put us in the same dormitory." "Are there no single rooms in the school?" Zhouwen frowned slightly. He was used to living alone from a young age. Furthermore, he still needed to game, so it was better for him to live alone. "No, the Federation has always been thinking of ways to cultivate our ability to fight as a team. Regardless of whether it is the combat test of 4 people in a team or the teamwork during university, they are all built on this principle. It's especially so for a school like Sunset College that has a military background. The management style is also half military. It's impossible to get a single room. Even if it's quiet, you can only stay in a group dormitory," Li Xian said. "And Jing also wants to enter Sunset College?" Zhouwen was slightly taken aback. "Definitely. Her brother is overseer in Tianzhua, a big shot in the military. She definitely wants to attend Sunset College, which has a military background." With that said, Li Xian looked at Zhouwen with a nefarious smile and asked, "Tell me, how did you offend in Jing? She actually transferred to Guide High School just to beat you up. With Jing's temper, she has never done such a thing in the past." Zhouwen thought for a moment and asked Li Xian, "Do you know Ouyang Lan?" "Of course. If you don't even know Ouyang Lan in a place like Luoyang, it would be a waste," Li Xian said with a smile. "Don't tell me you offended Ouyang Lan? Then you sure are unlucky. It's no wonder Jing beat you up." Zhouwen shook his head. "I didn't offend Ouyang Lan." "Then why did you mention her?" Li Xian looked at Zhouwen in puzzlement. Zhouwen asked again, "Has anything happened to Ouyang Lan recently?" "Yes. Who in Luoyang City doesn't know that Ouyang Lan has remarried? However, she didn't hold a grand wedding. She only invited some close friends for a gathering. Outsiders don't know what kind of man Ouyang Lan married. I only heard that he's a translator. His surname seems to be Zhou." With that said, Li Xian suddenly widened his eyes as he looked at Zhouwen and asked, "Your surname is also Zhou? Don't tell me there's something between the two of you?" Zhouwen shook his head without a word. Li Xian's heart felt like it was being scratched by a kitten, but there was nothing he could do if Zhouwen refused to say. Zhouwen stayed at Li Xian's place and returned to his room. The first thing he did was call Zhou Lingfeng. Zhou Lingfeng was Zhouwen's father, not his son. There was no need for him to doubt Zhou Lingfeng's decision, so Zhouwen had no intention of getting to the bottom of what Zhou Lingfeng wanted to do. In fact, Zhou Lingfeng had never vetoed Zhouwen's decisions. Even when it came to a major matter like attending college, Zhou Lingfeng didn't participate in his opinions. This seemed to have become a tacit understanding between the father and son. Zhouwen called Zhou Lingfeng to tell him that he had come to Luoyang and would be attending Sunset College in the future. "Son, is the college entrance exam over? How did it go?" Zhou Lingfeng's voice sounded from the phone, sounding somewhat languid. "Not bad. I've applied for Sunset College. If nothing unexpected happens, I'll be attending Sunset College in the future," Zhouwen said. "Sunset College? Isn't that in Luoyang?" "Come stay with me," Zhou Lingfeng said. "There's no need. I'm temporarily staying at a friend's place. I'll stay on campus after I start school." Zhouwen didn't wish to have anything to do with the Yin family. Zhou Lingfeng didn't force Zhouwen. Alright then, tell me if you need anything. I'll try my best to satisfy you. You're already attending college and aren't young anymore. I'll increase your living expenses in the future. Chapter 35. What sun strafe art? Zhou Feng asked in surprise. You didn't get Jing to give me the sun strafe art? Zhou was taken aback as well. It's not like you don't know that I'm not interested in cultivation. I don't know much about such matters, Zhou Feng said. Zhou fell silent. If Zhou Feng hadn't given him the sun strafe art, why didn't Jing say that she had? The matter seemed to have become a little complicated. What's Jing up to? Is the sun strafe art real or fake? Zhou was momentarily at a loss. Zhou couldn't tell if the sun strafe art was real or fake. The average person had no chance of coming into contact with the sun strafe art, so it was impossible for them to tell if it was real or fake. Zhou Feng continued, if it was given to you by little Jing, it might be a token of her sincerity. Keep it for now. I'll ask her when I see her. Got it. Zhou didn't say another word. Zhou Feng seemed to have a good impression of the siblings. Before figuring out the truth, it was pointless to say anything else. Everyone had their own independent thoughts. Even family members couldn't be forced to see things from their own point of view. Only the truth was convincing. Zhou had understood this from a young age. After hanging up, Zhou calmed himself down. He didn't game and instead began practicing his palm technique. He had already tried many times, but he was ultimately unable to use Inch Punch's method of exerting force. Therefore, he could only settle for the next best thing. He attempted to fuse Skeleton Palm and Inch Punch as a reference. Without any distractions, Zhou used Inch Punch's technique while striking out Skeleton Palm. Skeleton Palm's characteristics were indeed more suitable for Inch Punch. The process was smoother than Zhou imagined. The first few punches were still a little shaky as he failed to properly coordinate the two. However, in just a few punches, Zhou had already grasped the knack of it, allowing the coordination between the two to improve. After 10 punches, Zhou primordial energy was drained. All he could do was enter the game to grind vigor ants and obtain some primordial energy crystals to replenish his primordial energy before continuing his practice. Shortly after entering the game, Zhou was surprised to discover that his primordial energy had recovered a little without dropping any primordial energy crystals. In the past, when he cultivated the ascetic meditation, it took about an hour for him to recover a bit of primordial qi. Now, it only took a few minutes for him to recover a bit of primordial qi. The speed of his recovery was unimaginable. Is this the effect of the Lost Immortal Sutra? Zhou felt the essence energy slowly flowing through his body as he felt somewhat delighted. Zhou had never heard of such a primordial energy recovery speed at the mortal stage. Regardless of whether the Lost Immortal Sutra had any other uses, just this alone was astonishing. He continued controlling the blood-colored avatar to grind in-game. The mysterious phone was a touchscreen operation, but controlling the blood-colored avatar didn't rely solely on the touchscreen. Most of the time, it was controlled through thought control. The relationship between the two could be described as sharing thoughts. His thoughts and feelings were the same. He could also empathize with the blood-colored avatar's combat experience in-game. Upon seeing a mutated vigor ant crawl over, Zhou controlled the camera while using his thoughts to control the blood-colored avatar. He attempted to see if he could combine Skeleton Palm and Inch Punch. The blood-colored avatar struck the mutated vigor ant's head with its palm, but the mutated vigor ant's carapace remained undamaged. However, the mutated vigor ant charged forward a few steps before its body suddenly faltered and collapsed to the ground. 2 lines of system notification popped up on the bottom left corner of the phone screen. Killed mortal mutated vigor ant. The first line of notification wasn't anything special. Zhou had seen it many times in the past. Furthermore, the mutated vigor ant didn't drop anything. However, The second line of notification left Zhou Wen slightly taken aback. Comprehended high-level skeleton palm. Skeleton palm has evolved into ashen palm. Zhou Wen glanced at the blood-colored avatar's stats and indeed, he saw that the skeleton palm name in the primordial energy skill column had vanished. Replacing it was the ashen palm primordial energy skill. Primordial energy skill. Vigor Divine Fist, rank 9, primordial energy skill. Ashen palm, rank 10. Rank 10? Wasn't the skeleton palm a rank 1 primordial energy skill? Why did it become rank 10 after evolving into ashen palm? Zhou Wen was puzzled. The rank 10 ashen palm only required 5 primordial energy to be used once. It was the same as the rank 9 Vigor Divine Fist. Just based on the primordial energy expenditure, the rank 10 ashen palms might seem to be about the same as the rank 9 Vigor Divine Fist. Zhou Wen wanted to test the might of ashen palm, but the typical Vigor Ant and mutated Vigor Ant couldn't withstand the might of his palm. There wasn't much of a difference between rank 1 and rank 9. After pondering for a moment, Zhou Wen chose to exit the Ant Nest dungeon and enter the ancient Imperial City dungeon. As long as the blood-colored avatar didn't die, he didn't need to waste any blood after exiting the dungeon or switching dungeons. However, if the blood-colored avatar didn't die, the game dungeon wouldn't respawn. The creatures inside the dungeon wouldn't respawn either. The blood-colored avatar had previously died in the Ant Nest dungeon, so after entering the ancient Imperial City dungeon, the creatures in ancient Imperial City had already respawned. The blood-colored avatar rode the mutated Vigor Ant as it charged forward and quickly found the skeleton general that had respawned. As usual, he controlled the blood-colored avatar to jump off the mutated Vigor Ant's back and charge at the skeleton general. Using his positioning skills, he circled around the skeleton horse. After more than 10 minutes, Zhou Wen finally found an opportunity. The blood-colored avatar leaped up and rode on the skeleton horse's back, sitting behind the skeleton general. However, this time, Zhou Wen didn't get the blood-colored avatar to attack the skeleton general's weak point, its eye socket. Instead, he struck the back of the skeleton general's skull with his palm. The dried skeleton general's head did not suffer any damage from the palm strike, but the blood-colored flames within its skull splattered out like a smashed watermelon. The skeleton general rode the skeleton horse forward a few steps due to inertia. Then, all the bones in its body dispersed, turning into a pile of bones on the ground. Killed legendary creature, skeleton general. Discovered skeleton general dimensional crystal. Zhou Wen looked at the shiny dimensional crystal that dropped in-game and was pleasantly surprised. Ashen Palm was able to blast the skeleton general apart without attacking its weakness. Its might was clearly above the rank 9 Vigor Divine Fist. A rank 10 primordial energy skill is indeed powerful. I wonder if Ashen Palm has a chance of killing the silver-winged flying ant. Zhou Wen yearned to immediately storm to the silver-winged flying ant and give it a try. Chapter 36. The blood-colored avatar picked up the skeleton general crystal and immediately, a powerful primordial energy surged into Zhou Wen's body. Like a drill, it forcefully opened up a new path. After the force gradually vanished, a notification popped up on the game screen. Absorbed skeleton general crystal. Attained legendary primordial energy skill, penetrating spear. Zhou Wen was already prepared to be injured, but it went surprisingly smoothly. A mortal stage body typically could only fuse with a mortal stage primordial energy skill crystal. If one were to forcefully fuse with a legendary stage primordial energy skill, their body would suffer a powerful impact. In the worst-case scenario, their meridians would be damaged, and in the worst-case scenario, they would die on the spot. Zhou Wen had relied on his physique being much stronger than the typical mortal stage. Furthermore, he wasn't afraid of death in-game, which was why he dared to absorb the skeleton general crystal. He never expected the entire process to be so smooth. Apart from the pain of opening up the primordial energy passageway, There wasn't any physical damage. Is this how it is in-game, or is it an effect of the Lost Immortal Sutra? Zhou wasn't sure, but it was ultimately a good thing. Taking a look at the game's information, Penetrating Spear was a legendary rank 1 primordial energy skill. However, it was a spear-type primordial energy skill. It needed a spear-type weapon to produce its greatest might. Li Xian, come out. Zhou was just planning on switching dungeons and heading to Ant Nest to see if he could kill the silver-winged flying ant when he suddenly heard a woman's voice at the villa's entrance. At the same time, the doorbell kept ringing. Li Xian wasn't around, and Zhou was the only one in the villa. Although Zhou heard the doorbell, the person was looking for Li Xian. Since Li Xian wasn't home, he had no intention of opening the door. All he did was sit on the sofa and continue gaming. Li Xian, I know you're at home. If you don't come out, don't blame me for not standing on ceremony. The woman pressed the doorbell for quite a while, refusing to give up. Zhou pretended not to hear her and ignored her. The doorbell didn't affect him at all as he continued gaming. Zhou originally imagined that the woman would leave quickly, but to his surprise, the woman finally stopped after shouting for a while. However, in just 2 seconds, he heard a bang and 2 clangs. The woman had kicked the door open. The woman rushed into the villa and seeing that there was no one in the living room, she headed straight upstairs. She seemed to be very familiar with this place as she headed straight for Li Xian's room. Without knocking on the door, she kicked it open. Li Xian, it's useless no matter how you hide today. Seeing that there was still no one in the room, the woman walked along the corridor and kicked the doors open one by one. After kicking through the second room, the woman saw Zhou gaming against the headboard. The woman was delighted when she saw someone. However, when she saw that it wasn't Li Xian, her face was filled with disappointment. She glared at Zhou and asked, "What's wrong with you? I've been calling you for so long, didn't you hear me?" "I heard you," Zhou answered as he played with his phone without looking up at the woman. "Why didn't you answer when you heard it?" the woman said angrily. "You are looking for Li Xian, not me. Why should I answer?" Zhou said casually. The woman was momentarily unable to retort. She glared at Zhou and asked, "Where's Li Xian?" "I went out," Zhou answered. "Of course I know he went out. I'm asking you, where did he go?" The woman felt that the guy in front of her was really rude. "I don't know," Zhou answered very simply. He really didn't know. Just as the woman was about to say something, the phone in her pocket rang. She picked up the call and said a few words, as though she had something important to say. She prepared to turn around and leave. However, after taking a few steps, the woman seemed to think of something. She turned around and rushed in front of Zhou. She grabbed his arm and pulled him up. "Come with me. Consider it a favor. At least make up the numbers." "Who are you? I don't know you." Zhou frowned slightly and wanted to shake off the woman's hand. "For you to stay here, you must be Li Xian's scoundrel. You actually don't even know his sister? You eat, drink, and have fun with Li Xian. Everything is given by Li Xian. Is there a problem with helping his sister?" The woman seemed very anxious as she pulled Zhou out. Zhou was immediately rendered speechless. Although he wasn't the scoundrel the woman mentioned, it was a fact that he was staying at Li Xian's place. The woman's words didn't seem wrong. "Let go. I can walk by myself. What do you need my help for?" Zhou thought for a moment and felt that if it wasn't anything serious, it was only right to help. He could treat it as paying rent. The woman didn't let go when she heard that. As she walked, she said, "Don't worry. I'm just pulling you to make up the numbers. I don't expect you to really do anything. Just don't cause trouble." Zhou didn't even know Li Xian's sister's name before he was pulled out of the villa. There was a heavy motorcycle parked at the villa's entrance. She threw the helmet hanging on the handlebar to Zhou and got on it herself. "Get on." Zhou saw that she was wearing short boots, a t-shirt, and jeans. She was tall and had wavy black curly hair casually draped over her shoulders. She looked handsome and charming, completely different from the women Zhou had seen before. However, Zhou didn't have any special thoughts. After wearing the helmet, he sat behind Li Xian's sister. Sit tight. As there was only one helmet, the woman naturally didn't have to wear it after getting Zhou to wear it. After the motorcycle sped up, her long wavy hair fluttered in the wind, caressing Zhou from time to time. On the streets of Luoyang, one could occasionally see experts riding various dimensional creatures. This was relatively rare in Guide City. The traffic and companion beasts went their own ways. The scene looked abnormally harmonious. Companion beasts were becoming more and more important in the Federation. Many jobs that humans and machines found difficult to complete required companion beasts as support. With powerful companion beasts, not only could they make themselves stronger, but they could also serve the entire human race. The woman's motorcycle drove quickly as she weaved through the traffic on the street. It looked very dangerous, but she was surprisingly balanced. She didn't brake suddenly. Zhou sat in the back, gaming on his phone. Thankfully, the woman's driving was very stable, so it didn't affect his controls or performance. After riding for a while, Li Weiyang didn't feel a hand on her waist. She had a good impression of Zhou. She never had a good impression of Li Xian's group of scoundrels. If it wasn't for the urgency of time, she wouldn't have dragged Zhou along to make up the numbers. She originally imagined that Zhou would take the opportunity to openly hug her waist and take advantage of her, but she didn't feel Zhou's hand on her waist. Even his body didn't make much contact with hers. It was likely that he was deliberately maintaining a distance. I never expected there to be some shameless people among Li Xian's friends. As Li Weiyang thought to herself, she subconsciously turned her head to look at Zhou, who was sitting behind her. The moment she saw him, the good impression she had of him instantly vanished. She originally imagined that Zhou was a gentlemanly person, but only now did she realize that he was gaming on his phone at such a time. Furthermore, he was having so much fun. From the way he was engrossed in it, it was as though he wished he could dive into the game. Chapter 37. Li Weiyang brought Zhou to a pet arena and stopped. A few girls who had been waiting outside surrounded them and began chattering. After listening for a while, Zhou roughly understood the situation. Li Weiyang and the girls were students of Sunset College. They would be Zhou's seniors in the future. These female students and another female student had entered a dimensional zone to kill dimensional creatures. They were very lucky to have a mortal companion egg drop. It was an ancient warhorse companion egg. Furthermore, it was said that it had dropped from a mutated ancient warhorse. A mortal companion egg was very rare to begin with, so it was a huge stroke of luck to have one drop. Furthermore, it was a mutated ancient warhorse companion egg. Its quality was definitely extremely high, making it extremely valuable. Companion beasts of the same level had huge differences in quality. The 4 basic stats of a mortal companion beast typically fluctuated between 1 to 9, while the basic stats of a legendary companion beast fluctuated between 10 to 18. The importance of the basic stats was self-evident. The higher the basic stats of a companion beast, the stronger its talent skills. After transforming into a companion beast, the augmentation it provided its owner would be stronger. The mutated ancient warhorse's speed and strength were top-notch at the mortal stage, so a companion beast was definitely not bad. To have such a companion egg drop was a good thing. However, there was a disagreement over the ownership of the companion egg. Originally, the few of them had formed a team, so they should have split the spoils of war equally. However, the girl who had obtained the mutated ancient warhorse companion egg said that she was the one who killed the mutated ancient warhorse and dug out the mutated ancient warhorse companion egg. It should be hers. The other girls were naturally unwilling, but the girl named Su Mei had forcefully taken the companion egg because her boyfriend had some power in school. Furthermore, she had no intention of compensating them. The girls were infuriated. One of them had a good relationship with Li Weiyang, so she got her to stand up for them. After Li Weiyang heard what had happened, she wanted to mediate and get both parties to take a step back. It was fine for Su Mei to take the companion egg, but she had to give the other girls some compensation. However, who knew that Su Mei would rely on her boyfriend's influence to not give in at all? In the end, it ended up in a stalemate. Both parties agreed to fight it out in the pet arena. The winner could directly take away the mutated ancient warhorse companion egg. Su Mei's boyfriend was also a senior student at Sunset College. Li Weiyang also knew him. His name was Gao Yang. She also knew that Gao Yang was rather powerful and wasn't weak. Therefore, she wanted to rope Li Xian over and get him to find more people to bolster their reputation. This was to prevent Gao Yang from going back on his word after losing. However, to her surprise, she couldn't get through to Li Xian's phone. She couldn't find him at home, so she pulled Zhou over at the last minute. "Sis Weiyang, Li Xian isn't here. What should we do?" The women looked worried. Although Li Xian hadn't enrolled at Sunset College, his reputation as the prodigal son of the Li family had long spread throughout Luoyang. These girls had also heard of him. Furthermore, Li Xian often visited Li Weiyang. They had seen it before. "What's there to be afraid of? Don't you have me?" Li Weiyang said. "But Su Mei's boyfriend Gao Yang is a fourth-year senior. I heard he's also very powerful," a girl said timidly. "So what if he's a fourth-year senior? He's also at the mortal stage. I'm confident that I can defeat him and take back the companion egg," Li Weiyang said confidently. Zhou found it odd. Since Li Weiyang was Li Xian's sister, she was the Missy of the Li family. How could she not be able to settle such a trivial matter? She had even gone to the extent of having a duel in the pet arena. Zhou was automatically ignored by the girls. This was because although he had a good figure, his face was pale due to the excessive blood loss. He looked sickly and didn't look like someone who could fight. After entering the pet arena and arriving at an arena, they saw a group of young men and women from afar. Not only were there more people than Li Weiyang and company, but they were mostly tall boys. Leading them was a tall and handsome boy. He had his arm around a girl's waist as he sat in the spectator stands beside the arena. When he saw Li Weiyang and company walk over, he said with a smile, "Li Weiyang, you really dared to come? Why not? It's not difficult to defeat you." "I'll definitely take back the companion egg," Li Weiyang said. "I've heard of your talent, Li Weiyang. However, you're still far from being able to fight me. Besides, I'm a fourth-year senior. It's not nice for me to bully juniors like you," Gao Yang said with a smile. "Gao Yang, what's the meaning of this?" Li Weiyang had an ominous feeling. "I, Gao Yang, never bully others, so I specially found a second-year junior like you. As long as one of you can defeat him, I'll return the companion egg with both hands. Of course, the premise is that it has to be a student of our Sunset College. Outsiders don't count," Gao Yang said as he clapped his hands. In the spectator stands behind Gao Yang, a figure stood up. Gu Dian. When Li Weiyang and the other girls saw the figure's appearance, their expressions changed drastically. The more timid girls were so frightened that they were about to cry. Zhou stood by the side and carefully sized up the person. He was also alarmed. All his life, he had never seen a person who looked as ferocious as this person. Ugly and ferocious were two completely different concepts. This person wasn't ugly, but he left one in awe. He was like a devil. A timid person would probably be scared to death if they were to encounter him at night. Zhou didn't believe that looks alone could scare people to death, but Gu Dian really made one's heart turn cold. They didn't dare look him in the eye. "Gao Yang, you are so despicable. You actually got Gu Dian to fight on your behalf. Are you a sore loser?" Li Weiyang said with a nasty expression. Although she was very confident in her strength, Gu Dian wasn't an ordinary student. Gu Dian had the nickname of Evil Ghost of Ancient in school. It wasn't only because of his 2-meter-tall muscular body and ferocious appearance, but also because his strength was unfathomable. His strange strength made him nearly invincible among those at the mortal stage. Gu Dian was the first person to dare beat up a senior on the first day of Sunset College's entrance exam. Although Li Weiyang had never fought Gu Dian had once defeated a fourth year who was about the same strength as her with a few punches. Li Weiyang knew that her chances of winning against Gu Dian weren't high. Chapter 38. Li Weiyang's expression was cold, speechless. It wasn't that Sunset College couldn't find students stronger than Gu Dian. Those who could rank in the top 20 of the school's internal exams were basically at the legendary stage, so they were naturally stronger than the mortal stage Gu Dian. However, Li Weiyang didn't have a deep relationship with these seniors. If she rashly invited them, they might not be willing to give her face. Furthermore, the duel was about to begin, so it was too late to invite them. Gao Yang and Su Mei hadn't mentioned Gu Dian's battle all this while. Clearly, they didn't want to give Li Weiyang and company time to find someone else. Sis Weiyang, what should we do now? The girls looked at Li Weiyang worriedly. Li Weiyang gritted her teeth. At this point, we can only try our best. Sis Weiyang, why don't we forget it? We don't want the companion egg. Gu Dian is too terrifying. It would be bad if he were to flare up and hurt you, a girl said. Although the girls were somewhat indignant, they persuaded Li Weiyang not to vie for the companion egg. I can't let those two sluts, Gao Yang and Su Mei, benefit for nothing. Li Weiyang couldn't take it lying down when she saw Gao Yang and Su Mei's smug looks. After taking off her denim jacket and throwing it to a girl, Li Weiyang walked towards the arena with a heavy expression. The arena of the Pet Coliseum was actually meant for companion beasts. As battles had all sorts of uncertainties and were too dangerous, the League didn't encourage private duels. However, battles between companion beasts were strongly encouraged. Every city had several pet coliseums, allowing human experts with pets to fight with their pets. Pet competitions had already formed a huge industry chain in the League. Many humans with powerful companion beasts had become superstars, far more influential than the entertainment celebrities of the past. After all, having powerful pets meant that they were powerful themselves. They were truly the cream of the crop among humans. Although Zhou hadn't paid much attention to pet competitions, he knew quite a few pet celebrities from all the advertisements. For example, the #1 companion beast in the world, the epic demonic holy angel, was a companion beast superstar that everyone knew. The person who owned her naturally became a superstar. Of course, the world's #1 ranking was only for pets that participated in the pet competition. There were definitely powerful companion beasts that didn't participate in the competition. Zhou had heard that when legendary experts explored dimensional zones, they mostly fought with companion beasts. Unless it was absolutely necessary, no one was willing to participate in the battle personally. After all, humans only had one life. If a companion beast died, they could still think of ways to obtain it, but once a person died, they would have nothing left. Furthermore, a person could control multiple companion beasts, making them much stronger than a single person. Li Weiyang entered the arena and stood opposite Gu Dian. Although Li Weiyang was 1.7 meters tall and was considered tall among girls, she still appeared petite in front of Gu Dian. Gu Dian, can you ignore this matter? Li Weiyang stared at Gu Dian and asked. No, Gu Dian answered very directly without any hesitation. Without a word, Li Weiyang's slender and powerful legs produced terrifying strength. In a few steps, she appeared in front of Gu Dian and leaped up. Her waist displayed immense explosive strength in midair, and with the strength of her waist twisting, she kicked out. It was as fast as a bolt of lightning as she kicked at Gu Dian's neck. Zhou nodded to himself. Li Weiyang was indeed quite skilled. She was much stronger than Su Miantu. Furthermore, her kick was clearly a primordial energy skill. The strength of her kick was enough to split a tree as thick as a human. Gu Dian didn't react at all against such a kick. He allowed Li Weiyang's blade-like leg to cleave at his neck. Bam! With a dull thud, everyone was alarmed. Gu Dian stood there, enduring Li Weiyang's kick. He didn't even move his neck. Although Gao Yang and Su Mei knew that Gu Dian was very strong, they never expected him to be this terrifying. Against Li Weiyang's primordial energy skill kick, he didn't dodge at all. His body didn't even shake. Li Weiyang was equally alarmed, but she didn't hesitate. Gritting her teeth, she twisted her body and kicked again. Her slender and powerful thighs were like a butterfly weaving through flowers as she delivered 4 consecutive kicks. Gu Dian stood there like an iron tower, enduring Li Weiyang's 4 kicks without dodging. He didn't move from beginning to end, and Li Weiyang failed to injure him at all. When Li Weiyang delivered her 5th kick, Gu Dian finally moved. His hand shot out like lightning, grabbing Li Weiyang's long leg that was flying at him. In the next second, Gu Dian lifted one of Li Weiyang's legs and smashed her to the ground like a sandbag. With a thud, Li Weiyang's body bounced up half a foot in the arena before crashing back down. Although the arena's floor was made of special rubber material that had a powerful cushioning ability, Li Weiyang still spat out a mouthful of blood from the fall. She didn't get up for a long time. Gu Dian, you really don't know how to be tender to the fairer sex. How can you treat a beauty like that? Su Mei said gloatingly. Gu Dian ignored her and looked at Li Weiyang, who was struggling to get up, and asked, "Do you still want to fight?" "Yes, why not? I haven't lost yet." Li Weiyang struggled to stand up. There was still blood at the corner of her mouth. One of her arms had been dislocated from the fall, but she still spoke stubbornly. "Sis Weiyang, stop fighting. We don't want the companion egg." The girls were on the verge of tears. However, Gu Dian didn't care. Just as Li Weiyang finished typing, he charged in front of her like a tank. He pressed down on Li Weiyang's head and pressed her to the arena's ground. Bam! Li Weiyang's face hit the ground. Although the rubber ground had a certain cushioning effect, Gu Dian's strength was just too great. The force of the press fractured Li Weiyang's nose and brow bone as blood immediately flowed all over her face. "Do you still want to fight?" Gu Dian asked as he looked at Li Weiyang on the ground. Li Weiyang's face was covered in blood as she propped herself up with one hand. After exerting her strength a few times, she barely stood up, but her eyes were stubborn. A timid girl cried. Zhouwen looked at Li Weiyang's stubborn gaze and knew that she wanted to continue fighting. Why is this woman so stubborn? Zhouwen frowned slightly. He originally didn't wish to interfere in this matter, but he couldn't just stay in Li Xian's house and eat Li Xian's food while watching Li Xian's sister get tortured. Chapter 39. Everyone was a little nervous. Even Gao Yang, Su Mei, and company were somewhat frightened. Although they were the ones who had invited Gu Dian, no one expected him to be so ruthless. If anything were to happen to Li Weiyang, it would be a huge matter. Although Li Weiyang was an illegitimate daughter of the Li family and wasn't allowed to enter the Li family, she still had the blood of the Li family flowing in her. If anything were to happen to her, it was impossible for the Li family to ignore it. At that moment, Zhouwen's voice sounded, immediately giving everyone an outlet to vent their tense emotions. Even Li Weiyang and Gu Dian looked at him. "Su Mei, you just said that all of us can go on stage as long as we are students of Sunset College, right?" Zhouwen asked Su Mei. "That's right. What are you getting at?" Su Mei didn't know what Zhouwen was getting at. "I just got into Sunset College this year, and haven't reported to school yet. Do you think I can go on stage?" Zhouwen asked again. He thought that if Su Mei said no, he could take the opportunity to pull Li Weiyang down so that he could return home early to game. Su Mei immediately laughed when she heard Zhouwen. "So it's our junior from Sunset College. I couldn't tell that you are a man who has tender feelings for the fairer sex. Alright, I'll give you a chance to be a hero saving a damsel in distress." Go on if you want to, but don't blame me for not warning you if you get injured. University students are different from high school students. Gao Yang and company roared with laughter. Those who could get into Sunset College were all geniuses. There were plenty of people who ranked first or second in their respective cities. But so what? After entering the college, they still had to be educated to behave themselves. High school straight-A students were only the most basic part of Sunset College. There were very few who could truly stand out. Most of them would be obliterated by the masses. This was especially so for the top scorers of the small cities. Most of them would gradually become mediocre when they entered Sunset College. It wasn't that they weren't outstanding enough, but that there were more outstanding people than them. As for Gu Dian, he was the person who was more outstanding than his peers. A rookie who hadn't even matriculated dared to challenge Gu Dian for Li Weiyang. From their point of view, this was considered lustful. Gao Yang smiled and said, "Junior brother, you do have some of my elegance when I was young. Don't worry, go ahead if you want to. I'll give you a chance to show off in front of the beauties." Although he said that, he thought to himself, Gu Dian doesn't know what's good for him. It's not good for him to injure Li Weiyang. It's good to swap her out. The girls on Li Weiyang's side looked at Zhou Wen worriedly, afraid that his sickly body would be punched to death by Gu Dian. "Senior Endless, let me do it," Zhou Wen said as he flipped onto the arena. "Don't mess around. Get down quickly." Li Weiyang was only pulling Zhou Wen along to put on a show. She had no intention of getting him to fight for her. Furthermore, Gu Dian was too strong, so he didn't hold back. Looking at Zhou Wen's sickly appearance, if he were to really kill him with a single punch, none of the students would be able to escape responsibility. Even Li Weiyang wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility. Zhou Wen couldn't be bothered to say anything else. All he wanted was to resolve this matter as soon as possible and return to gaming in peace. Without waiting for Li Weiyang to say a word, Zhou Wen reached out and lifted her up. Li Weiyang's arm was dislocated and she was injured. Without any room for resistance, she was lifted up by Zhou Wen. "What are you doing? Put me down." Li Weiyang was embarrassed and angry. Zhou Wen ignored her and carried her off the arena. He handed her to the girls before returning to the arena. "We are all classmates from the same school. We aren't mortal enemies, so there's no need for us to fight to the death. If an accident were to happen, no one can bear the responsibility. Why don't we use another method to decide the victor?" Zhou Wen said as he sized up Gu Dian. "What method?" Gu Dian spoke succinctly. His voice didn't sound like a high school student's at all. It was deep, hoarse, and powerful, more like the voice of a man in his 30s or 40s. Coupled with his ferocious appearance, Zhou Wen definitely wouldn't believe that he was a second-year student if he hadn't been wearing Sunset College's uniform. "Let me punch you once. As long as you take less than 3 steps back, I'll consider it my loss. If not, I'll win. What do you think of this suggestion?" Zhou Wen was only saying it casually. It was obvious that Gu Dian would be at a disadvantage in such a duel. However, it would be a waste of time to find a strength-measuring device. Therefore, Zhou Wen made the suggestion. To his surprise, Gu Dian said coldly without a thought, "Sure." Zhou Wen was somewhat surprised as he said with a smile, "Then let's begin." Gao Yang curled his lips and said, "That rookie thinks he has the upper hand. If he knew what primordial energy art and primordial energy skill Gu Dian cultivates, he would probably cry, much less laugh." "Brother Yang, what primordial energy art and primordial energy skill does Gu Dian cultivate?" The people around Gao Yang were also curious. "I can't say for sure what primordial energy art he cultivates, but he has a primordial energy skill. All of you must have heard of it," Gao Yang said mysteriously. "What primordial energy skill does Gu Dian have?" Sume couldn't help but be curious as she shook Gao Yang's arm coquettishly. Gao Yang chuckled and said, "Have you heard of dimensional creatures like the needle porcupine? Brother Yang, are you kidding us?" We have obviously heard of dimensional creatures like the needle porcupine. Although it's only at the mortal stage, it's especially difficult to deal with. Not only is its carapace hard, but it's also covered in spikes. Apart from the seniors at the legendary stage, we have to avoid it, a male student said. Gu Dian's primordial energy skill is the porcupine skill formed from the needle porcupine crystal. If he were to use it, not only would his body be as hard as steel, but he would also have the ability to reflect damage, Gao Yang said. That can't be. I heard that needle porcupines rarely drop primordial energy skills, and even if they drop, with the needle porcupine's ability, it would at most be a rank 1 or 2 primordial energy skill. Is it that powerful? Su Mei said in disbelief. That's why Gu Dian is so terrifying. Not only is he lucky to have a porcupine skill drop, but he also managed to cultivate a rank 1 primordial energy skill to rank 9. He didn't rely on primordial energy skill crystals to raise its rank. Don't you think he's sick? Gao Yang paused for a moment before sneering and saying, rank 9 hedgehog skill. I once saw a fellow in our year use a primordial energy skill to strike Gu Dian. In the end, that fellow's palm was pierced with countless bloody holes. It was as though he had been pierced by countless steel needles. He nearly crippled his entire hand. It's fine if that rookie doesn't know any primordial energy skills, but if he were to use one to fight Gu Dian, he would definitely be in trouble. Chapter 40. Sis Weiyang, will he be alright? A few girls helped Li Weiyang sit down and asked worriedly. Li Weiyang obviously didn't know if Zhouwen could do it. However, Zhouwen was Li Xian's friend, and from the character of Li Xian's so-called friends, they were definitely unreliable. However, Li Weiyang couldn't say that out loud. All she could do was console him. Since he dares to go on stage, he should have some ability. Instead of saying that she was consoling her companions, she was consoling herself. Zhouwen stood in front of Gu Dian. He wasn't considered short among boys, but he was still a head shorter in front of Gu Dian. Gu Dian's body was just too muscular. Not only was he tall, but his muscles were also extremely firm. He gave off a feeling of explosive strength and didn't look clumsy at all. During Gu Dian's battle with Li Weiyang, Zhouwen could tell that he had cultivated in a high-level protective primordial energy skill. Otherwise, no matter how strong his body was, he wouldn't be able to withstand the bombardment of a primordial energy skill. Gu Dian's eyes were cold as he stared at Zhouwen like a devil. He said coldly, "Come on, don't waste time. You have to be careful. This punch of mine is very powerful," Zhouwen warned before slowly raising his fist. Su Mei was instantly amused when she heard Zhouwen. She said with a mocking smile, "It's great that you have great strength. Gu Dian loves strength the most. Use more strength and don't disappoint him." Su Mei's words sounded like a joke, but they were actually extremely vicious. Gu Dian's porcupine skill had a terrifying ability to reflect damage. The stronger Zhouwen used, the greater the damage he suffered. Although Gao Yang didn't say a word, he was also waiting to watch the show. There were many experts among the students of Sunset College, but in terms of the mortal stage, no one could match Gu Dian. "If you aren't afraid of death, feel free to punch." Gu Dian's expression didn't change, but it was already very terrifying. Zhouwen didn't say anything else as he punched out with his right fist. The immense strength produced by Vigor Divine Fist caused his fist to swell up like a hammer. Gu Dian's eyes focused as he used all his strength to stand firm. His body suffused a strange flush as though he was burning. Gao Yang knew that it was a characteristic of the porcupine skill as the smile on his face became even more obvious. When Li Weiyang saw Gu Dian's abnormality, she immediately thought of something. Ignoring her injuries, she anxiously shouted at Zhouwen, "Don't punch. That's porcupine skill." Bang! Unfortunately, before she could finish her sentence, Zhouwen's fist had already struck Gu Dian's abdomen. This was a spot that Zhouwen had deliberately chosen. The abdomen was a part of the body that could withstand blows, so it was unlikely to be fatal. The fist that was as hard as iron collided with the bulging muscles, and only a muffled sound was heard. There was actually the faint sound of metal colliding. Zhou and Gu Dian's gazes froze at the same time. Then, under Gao Yang and Su Mei's incredulous gazes, Gu Dian's muscular body bent slightly like a shrimp. His feet seemed to slide on ice as he retreated 3 to 4 meters before coming to a stop. On the special rubber floor, there were 2 black marks that were 3 to 4 meters long, like the tire marks left behind by a car braking suddenly. Li Moyang looked at Zhou in a daze, finding it unbelievable that Zhou's punch could send Gu Dian, who was using hedgehog skill, back 3 to 4 meters. The other girls were already cheering. This was no longer a distance of 3 or 4 meters. It was at least 7 or 8 steps. Zhou retracted his trembling fist and looked at Gao Yang as he said, "Gao Yang, do you mean what you said just now?" His punch had sent Gu Dian retreating, but he didn't feel any better. Even now, his fist was still trembling uncontrollably. Gao Yang didn't say a word as he looked at Gu Dian. Gu Dian said coldly, "I've lost." Gao Yang nodded and looked at Su Mei. "Give them the companion egg." Su Mei hurriedly stood up and said loudly, "Why should I give it to them? The agreement was between them. I didn't say that Gu Dian would lose if he retreated 3 steps. Such an agreement isn't reasonable at all. Besides, Gu Dian's feet didn't move, so it can only be considered 1 step. Let him fight Gu Dian again. If he can defeat Gu Dian, it will be considered his win. Besides, he isn't a student of Sunset College." Slap. Before Su Mei could finish her sentence, Gao Yang slapped her in the face. Su Mei was stunned. "Do I need to repeat myself? A loss is a loss. I, Gao Yang, never go back on my word. Or do you think that a companion egg is more important than my promise?" Gao Yang said as he stared coldly at Su Mei. Su Mei wore an aggrieved look, but she didn't dare say another word. She reluctantly took out a companion egg from her bag and handed it to Gao Yang through gritted teeth. Then, she turned around and left. Gao Yang ignored Su Mei and walked in front of Zhou with the companion egg. He threw it at Zhou and stared at him. "What's your name?" Zhou answered calmly. "Zhou, right? I'll remember you. Since you will be a student of Sunset College in the future, we will have plenty of time to interact in the future," Gao Yang said coldly before turning around and leaving with the group of students. Gu Dian glanced at Zhou but didn't say a word. He followed behind Gao Yang and company. Li Weiyang walked over and sized up Zhou. "Zhou, I couldn't tell. You look like a gigolo, but you actually have such strength," she said. "Zhou, are you really our junior? Are high school students these days so strong?" "Junior, that punch of yours was a primordial energy skill, right? It's really impressive. What's your name?" A few girls surrounded Zhou and asked all sorts of questions excitedly. It looked like they were more interested in Zhou than the companion egg he had brought back. "I was lucky to win this time. That fellow who looks like a devil is indeed terrifying. If we were to really fight, it's hard to tell who would win." Zhou returned the companion egg to Li Weiyang and raised the hand that had punched out. There were many needle-like wounds on the back of his hand. His limbs were numb and they were oozing blood. Thankfully, there wasn't much blood loss. "You're injured?" Li Weiyang was alarmed when she saw the needle-like wounds on the back of Zhou's hand. Without waiting for Zhou's answer, Li Weiyang handed the companion egg to the girls and got them to return first. Then, she pulled Zhou out. "Let's go. I'll take you to check on your injuries." "There's no need. It's just a superficial wound. My bones weren't injured," Zhou hurriedly said. "You have to go for a checkup. Otherwise, it'll be troublesome if there are any residual effects." Li Weiyang dragged Zhou to the medical room. There was a special medical room in the pet arena. When they arrived, the wound on the back of Zhou's hand had already coagulated into a scar. It would be fine after some treatment. On the other hand, Li Weiyang's injuries weren't light. One of her arms was dislocated, and the wound on her face needed treatment. She made Zhou run around to handle all sorts of procedures. Chapter 41. It wasn't easy for Zhou to return home. He imagined that he could finally game in peace, but to his surprise, Li Xian rushed back the moment he sat down on the sofa and launched the game dungeon. Your door was kicked open by a woman who claims to be your sister, Li Weiyang. Zhou explained the situation first to prevent Li Xian from thinking that he was the one who destroyed the villa. However, Li Xian thought nothing of it. With a hint of excitement, he said to Zhou mysteriously, "Are you interested in seeing the dimensional zone I told you about? You mean the dimensional zone that produces companion beasts with organs?" Zhou asked. "That's it. How about it? Are you interested in taking a look?" Li Xian asked. "We haven't registered for school, right? Can we enter now?" Zhou looked at Li Xian suspiciously. "Ordinary people obviously can't enter, but your brother Li isn't an ordinary person." "Of course he can enter," Li Xian said smugly as he patted his chest. "All right, let's go take a look." Zhou really wanted to take a look, but he wasn't in a rush to enter the dimensional zone. Instead, he wanted to see if the dimensional zone here could be downloaded and installed on his phone like in Guide Ancient City. "Bro, can't you give me an excited expression? You make me feel no sense of accomplishment," Li Xian said gloomily. "You're amazing." Zhou controlled his phone and didn't even look up as he gave a perfunctory reply. Forget it." Li Xian turned even more depressed, but he turned happy in a blink of an eye. He pulled Zhou out and said, "Lad, I'll broaden your horizons today." When they reached the yard, Zhou saw a white tiger that was bigger than a cow lying outside the villa. A legendary jade-eyed white tiger. "How is it? Isn't it cool? I just hatched it today." It was a narrow escape from death. Li Xian's saliva flew everywhere. "Don't you need to act when you're so ostentatious?" Zhou asked curiously. Li Xian's face sank as he said, "In the past, I didn't fight with him because I didn't want our family to fall out. Since he won't even spare my life, why should I stand on ceremony with him? From now on, I'll become the Li family's genius, Li Xian. Everything that belongs to me will be mine." Zhou gave Li Xian a thumbs up. A genius like Li Xian really shouldn't be buried. However, Zhou was very curious. Li Xian cultivated in the invincible connate divine art. If he continued cultivating it, wouldn't he be a virgin forever? Li Xian jumped onto the jade-eyed white tiger's back and said, "Let's not talk about that. Come on up. I'll take you for a ride. This jade-eyed white tiger is extraordinary. If enough resources are used on it, it has a chance of advancing to the epic king white tiger. That would be truly terrifying." Zhou knew that some companion beasts could evolve, but few could. Furthermore, evolution required special dimensional materials. The conditions were very harsh. Currently, the Federation had been doing research in this area. There were only 300 to 400 companion beasts that could evolve. The rest were still being researched. Riding a companion beast didn't feel good at all. It was extremely bumpy, so Zhou would rather sit in a comfortable car. However, Li Xian was extremely excited as he rode the jade-eyed white tiger. From time to time, he would wave and whistle at the beauties by the side of the road. This fellow's foppish personality isn't purely fake. Zhou suddenly thought of a question. He leaned close to Li Xian's ear and whispered, "Li Xian, what are the conditions to incubate a legendary companion egg at the mortal stage?" When Li Xian heard that, he said, "You want to incubate that skeleton general, right? I'm telling you, don't mess around. Don't think you can do it just because I can easily incubate legendary companion beasts. I'm telling you very seriously that people with such thoughts will most likely end up crippled or dead." After a pause, Li Xian said smugly, The most important condition to incubate a companion egg is to have sufficient primordial energy. Typical legendary companion eggs require more than 10 primordial energy points to incubate. Typical mortal stage humans don't have that much primordial energy. After their primordial energy is sucked dry, the vitality and flesh essence in their bodies will replace the primordial energy and be extracted. When that happens, they will either die or be crippled. The reason why I can incubate legendary companion eggs is firstly because my invincible connate divine art has been cultivated to 9 primordial energy points. Furthermore, I have powerful vitality and the ability to radiate flesh and blood, so I'm not afraid of being sucked dry. Even so, I specially chose legendary companion eggs that require less primordial energy to incubate. Only by doing so can I barely survive. It's impossible for others to succeed unless you aren't afraid of death. Give up. I'm unique, Li Xian added smugly. Li Xian's words reminded Zhou Wen that he was obviously afraid of death, but the blood-colored avatar in-game wasn't. Perhaps he could use the blood-colored avatar to incubate a legendary companion beast. Unfortunately, there's no way to bring a companion egg from real life into the game. If I want to give it a try, I can only get a legendary companion egg to drop in-game. With this in mind, Zhou Wen's heart stirred. The phone's camera function can lock onto and download dimensional zones. I wonder if it's of any use for companion eggs? With this in mind, Zhou Wen took out the companion egg and phone from his pocket. He sat behind Li Xian, so with Li Xian in the way, no one could see him. Zhou Wen attempted to switch on the mysterious phone's camera function and aimed it at the skeleton general companion egg. Beep. To Zhou Wen's pleasant surprise, the camera function worked. When the camera was aimed at the skeleton general companion egg, a green frame appeared on the phone screen. With a beep, it locked onto the companion egg. At the same time, text and data appeared on the phone screen. Skeleton General Companion Egg, Legendary Life Providence, Oath of City Defense Strength, 15 Speed, 13 Constitution, 16 Primordial Energy, 18 Primordial Energy Skill, Penetrating Spear, Rank 3, Companion Form, General Bone Armor. Zhou Wen looked at the Skeleton General's stats in astonishment. It wasn't that the numbers were shocking, but that the companion egg hadn't hatched yet. There was no way to test it, so no one knew the exact stats of the hatched companion beast. Yet, the phone was able to list the detailed data just by taking a picture. It was truly miraculous. The same type of companion beast had different stats. Naturally, the higher the better, especially when it came to primordial energy skills. Companion beasts with higher ranks were much more expensive. Beat. As Zhou Wen was looking at the skeleton general's stats, his phone rang again. At the same time, another message popped up on the screen. Skeleton General and Mutated Vigor Ants compatibility is 47%. Fusion evolution success rate is 47%. Do you want to fuse? Yes and no options popped up on the phone screen. Without any hesitation, Zhou Wen chose yes. Then, he heard a click, the sound of the camera taking a picture. Chapter 42. As the Skeleton General Companion Egg appeared on the screen, Zhou Wen's Mutated Vigor Ant appeared on the other side. At the same time, a notification popped up on the screen. As the Mutated Vigor Ant has been incubated, the Skeleton General Companion Egg can only be used as a supplementary ingredient. Confirm fusion? Zhou Wen chose yes. After all, he might not be able to incubate the Skeleton General Companion Egg. There was still a chance of obtaining the Mutated Vigor Ant in the future, so there was no harm in giving it a try. With Zhou Wen's choice, the Skeleton General Companion Egg flew towards the Mutated Vigor Ant. When it entered the Mutated Vigor Ant, the game screen immediately turned into a swirling chaos. Ding! After a while, the game screen finally returned to normal. At the same time, there was a notification sound as a notification popped up. Fusion successful. mortal mutated vigor ant, has evolved into mortal mutated skeleton ant. Zhou immediately felt depressed. After fusing with the legendary skeleton general, he was still at the mortal stage. No matter how he looked at it, he had suffered a huge loss. Taking a closer look at the skeleton ant that had successfully fused, he saw that its original red carapace had turned a dark red. Furthermore, the texture of the carapace had also changed. It looked like white bones dyed in blood. Even its antennae and claws had turned into the texture of blood and bone. Furthermore, its claws had turned sharp. They were covered in serrated bone spikes, making it look extremely ferocious and terrifying. Especially its two front claws, they looked like two odd-shaped bone spears. Although it looked rather powerful after its evolution, it was still at the mortal stage. No matter how much it evolved, it was impossible for it to match a legendary companion beast. Clicking on the mutated skeleton ant's stats, Zhou was slightly taken aback. Compared to the mutated vigor ant, the mutated skeleton ant's stats had changed drastically. Mutated skeleton ant, mortal stage strength, 10 speed, 9 constitution, 10 primordial energy, 9 talent skill, skeleton spike, rank 10, companion form, bracer strength and constitution have become 10. The talent skill has also become rank 10. Zhou was somewhat astonished. He had never heard of a companion beast's talent skill having rank 10. In fact, Zhou had always believed that rank 9 was the limit of primordial energy skills. Only after his Ashen Palm reached rank 10 did he know of the existence of rank 10 primordial energy skills. Zhou really wanted to summon the mutated skeleton ant to see what it looked like. After all, the game was cartoonish, so it was still somewhat different from real life. Unfortunately, he was sitting on Li Xian's jade-eyed white tiger. It wasn't convenient for him to summon the mutated skeleton ant. When the arrogant Li Xian arrived at Sunset College's entrance, he obediently put away his companion beasts and walked in with Zhou. Sunset College was a new college established after the dimensional storms. It was very close to Dragon Gate Grotto, which was currently the largest dimensional zone in Luoyang. To this day, humans had yet to fully explore it. It could even be said that the area that humans could explore was only a very small portion of it. Apart from Dragon Gate Grotto, Sunset College also discovered quite a number of dimensional zones. It could be said that Sunset College occupied most of the dimensional zone resources in Luoyang. Because it was a semi-closed school, even though they were all university students, they still wore the same uniform in the school. It was a bit like a military uniform, but there were some differences. It was still the holidays, but there were still many students in the school. Li Xian and Zhou were stopped by the guards at the entrance. Sunset College's guards weren't security guards, but real soldiers. In fact, the dimensional zones in Sunset College were also guarded by real troops. Li Xian took out 2 special passes before they were allowed to enter the school. As Li Xian led Zhou in, he introduced, Luoyang is the ancient capital of 13 dynasties. Over the millennia, ancient cities have been built in Luoyang. However, due to various reasons, these ancient cities have been destroyed in the long river of time. It can be said that the entire underground area of Luoyang is formed from the stacking of ancient cities. Ever since the dimensional storms, many dimensional zones have been formed underground. The deeper one goes, the more terrifying the dimensional zones are. The people of Luoyang are used to calling the underground dimensional zones dungeons. At present, the dungeons that have been explored have 4 levels. There's definitely more below, but no human expert has been able to charge down. This time, a new dungeon entrance was discovered at Ancient Path. Furthermore, new dimensional creatures and companion beasts in the shape of organs were discovered there. Zhou listened to Li Xian's explanation seriously. Sunset College was indeed huge. The two of them walked for more than half an hour before finally arriving at the Ancient Path that Li Xian mentioned. Ancient Path was actually a swamp. It was said that this was once the entrance of the ancient Yellow River. The Yellow River had once wreaked havoc here, drowning the ancient city underground. However, the ecliptic had changed its course several times and no longer flowed through here. In this ecliptic ancient path, they discovered a new dimensional zone. When Zhou saw a stone monument in the swamp, his eyes lit up. The stone monument stood in the swamp and was about 10 meters tall. There was a sitting Buddha engraved on it with fairies circling it. Among the many engraved patterns, Zhou saw a tiny palm symbol. This tiny palm symbol didn't stand out among the many fairies and Buddha symbols, but to Zhou it was just too familiar. Zhou had seen a similar symbol on Guide Ancient City's city gate. Furthermore, the mysterious phone had locked onto the tiny palm symbol to download Guide Ancient City as a game dungeon. However, this tiny palm symbol was somewhat different from the one Zhou had seen in Guide Ancient City. Guide Ancient City's tiny palm symbol held a picture that resembled an onion or garlic. But the palm symbol here had a blooming lotus flower carved in the middle of its palm. Let's see if I can download it as a game dungeon. Zhou took out his phone and switched on the camera function, aiming it at the tiny palm symbol on the stone monument. Beep! A tiny green frame appeared on the phone screen and locked onto the tiny palm symbol. With a light beep, he saw the familiar words downloading. It really works. Zhou was pleasantly surprised. Thinking that Zhou was taking pictures, Li Xian said to him, "The style of this stone monument should be from the Northern Wei dynasty." Back then, Buddhism was flourishing. Zhou didn't hear what Li Xian said at all. The phone had already finished downloading and a lotus flower symbol appeared on the phone's home screen. At the same time, 4 words appeared below it. Chapter 43. Beneath the stone monument was the entrance to the dimensional zone. It was guarded by the military, so Li Xian took out 2 passes for the duo to enter. Following the stone monument's blue brick steps, they went deep underground. Zhou finally knew why the people of Luoyang City called dimensional zones dungeons. In an underground space dozens of meters deep, a dilapidated ancient city was connected to the underground world. All sorts of ancient blue brick buildings made it look like a maze. Not far from each other, there were oil lamps on the blue brick walls. The dim yellow light made the dark and damp underground ancient city appear even more ancient. Zhou and company were on a long street. The buildings on both sides of the street were engraved with images related to Buddhism. Even the blue tiles on the roofs were engraved with flying fairies. Level 8 Strength Crystal for Level 8 Speed Crystal. There's a speed for exchange. There's only one Buddha Heart Lotus Crystal. It's only for exchange and not for sale. The most complete and detailed map of Buddha City. With the map in hand, Buddha City is free to roam. On both sides of the street, there were many youths in student uniforms setting up stalls. Clearly, they were seniors of Sunset College. Zhou originally wanted to buy a map, but he was stopped by Li Xian. Buddha City has only been discovered recently. The students here have only explored the nearby area. Their maps aren't of much value. I have a new map from the military. It's much more useful than theirs. Let's try our luck at the Lotus Pond and see if we can find the Buddha Heart Lotus, Li Xian said as he walked with the map in hand. What's the Buddha Heart Lotus? Zhou asked. It's a plant-type dimensional creature. Didn't I tell you that an organ companion beast was found here? The Buddha Heart Lotus is one of them. The Buddha Heart Lotus companion beast's companion form is a heart, Li Xian explained. With the map in hand, Li Xian led Zhou through the dark dungeon. Perhaps it was because the nearby dimensional creatures had been wiped clean, they didn't encounter a single dimensional creature along the way. After walking for about an hour, the scenery in front of them suddenly opened up. A large expanse of dark green lotus leaves came into view. Those lotus leaves were as green as jade, and they emitted a green light. This large underground lotus pond was at least a few acres in size. The green light illuminated the entire underground world in an emerald green. Far away from the shore, one could faintly see huge white lotus flowers blooming. Are those the Buddha heart lotuses? Zhouwen asked as he stared at the gigantic white lotuses. That's right. Those are Buddha heart lotuses, a plant-type dimensional creature. However, those Buddha heart lotuses are too far from the shore. Unless one has the ability to fly, there's no way to approach them, Li Xian said. Can't I swim over? Zhouwen looked at the water in the lotus pond. Under the reflection of the lotus leaves, it was green and transparent like a crystal. Please don't. The water in the lotus pond can even melt steel. A person will instantly be reduced to a pile of bones if they enter, Li Xian hurriedly said. In that case, what's the point of us coming here? Zhouwen frowned slightly. That's why I said we should try our luck. If there are Buddha heart lotuses blooming by the shore, we will have a chance. Li Xian rubbed his nose and said, however, it looks like our luck isn't that good. There aren't any Buddha heart lotuses blooming by the shore. As they spoke, they suddenly heard the sound of hooves coming from the direction they had come from. The two turned their heads and saw a white horse galloping over. Riding on it was a cold-looking boy. The white horse was extremely fast, and in moments, it had arrived in front of the lotus pond. However, the boy had no intention of stopping at the precipice. The white horse's speed didn't slow down at all as it charged straight into the lotus pond. In the next second, Zhouwen was surprised to discover that the white horse had a pair of snow-white wings on its sides. It soared into the sky and flew at a low altitude above the lotus leaf. A white feathered flying horse at the mortal stage. It's an extremely rare companion beast. There's only one in all of Sunset College. Its owner is a second-year student of Sunset College, Luo Xian. He's named one of the 4 school hunks of Sunset College. He's an arrogant fellow. I don't like him, Li Xian said enviously as he looked at the white feathered flying horse. Although his jade-clear white tiger's combat strength was much faster than the white feathered flying horses, it couldn't fly. Naturally, it couldn't ride the white horse across the lotus pond as suavely as Luo Xian. Luo Xian approached a Buddha heart lotus on the white horse. When he was about 10 meters away from it, he suddenly saw the petals of the Buddha heart lotus shrink, forming an oval shape. When the petals suddenly opened, an emerald lotus seed shot out and blasted at Luo Xian like a cannonball. Luo Xian's expression didn't change as a cold beam flashed by his waist. The emerald lotus seed was sliced into 2. Only then did it become clear that he had a sword in his hand. What a fast strike! Zhouwen was slightly surprised. The Luo family plays with swords to begin with. The Azure Star sword cannon is considered a famous sword art, so it's not surprising that he's fast, Li Xian said sourly. He wasn't jealous of Luo Xian's sword techniques, but that the white feathered flying horse was just too pretentious. Although it was only at the mortal stage, it looked even cooler than the jade-clear white tiger. Zhouwen was also somewhat envious. Although the mutated skeleton ant was strong, its appearance was truly terrifying. In terms of appearance, it wasn't on the same level as the white feathered flying horse. Of course, Zhouwen didn't care about appearance, but the white feathered flying horse's flying ability was just too practical. The white feathered flying horse swept across the lotus pond as Luo Xian's sword flashed. The gigantic white Buddha heart lotus was slashed down by him. Li Xian and Zhouwen's eyes turned red as they watched Luo Xian cleave down the Buddha heart lotuses. If I had known, I would have thought of a way to get a companion beast that can fly, Li Xian said hatefully. Forget it. Let's take a look elsewhere. Apart from the Buddha heart lotuses, there should be other dimensional creatures here, right? Zhouwen asked. There's another place up ahead with dimensional creatures, but it's a little odd. When the military explored it, many people died for no reason. Even legendary experts weren't spared. It's now listed as a forbidden zone. Typical students wouldn't approach it, Li Xian said as he looked at the map. How did those people die? Zhou asked Li Xian with his interest piqued. It wouldn't be odd if they knew how they died. After all, they died while walking. No dimensional creatures were seen, nor were there any wounds on their bodies. It's just that when the corpses were brought back for autopsy, they discovered that their organs had all deteriorated and had shrunk severely, Li Xian said. Apart from these two places, are there no other places in Buddha City with dimensional creatures? Zhou frowned slightly. There's definitely more deep in Buddha City, but even the military hasn't explored it. How would the typical student dare go there? That's just courting death. We can't risk our lives, right? Chapter 44. Just as Zhou was about to say something, he suddenly heard a splash as though a bomb had exploded in the water. Both of them turned their heads and saw waves rising in the lotus pond like an erupting volcano. Amidst the waves, a gigantic lotus flower with a diameter of more than 10 meters bloomed. The lotus flower was somewhat different from ordinary Buddha heart lotuses. Ordinary Buddha heart lotuses had pure white petals, but although this Buddha heart lotus's petals were also white, there were many blood-colored patterns on them. The blood-colored patterns were faintly discernible, outlining the silhouette of a seated Buddha. It was as though there was a blood-colored seated Buddha on every petal. Luo Xian rode the white-winged flying horse to dodge the splashes in midair, but the splashes had long splashed onto the white-winged flying horse. The white-winged flying horse neighed in pain. Its snow-white hide was corroded by the droplets of water, forming bloody holes. It looked very terrifying. Luo Xian's expression turned nasty as he desperately steered the white-winged flying horse towards the bank. If he were to fall into the water now, it would be difficult for him and the white-winged flying horse to survive. Reality wasn't a game. Be it humans or companion beasts, death was death. There was no chance of a revival. It was unlike Zhou Wen's phone game, where he could revive after death. Luo Xian wanted to escape, but unfortunately, the demonic Buddha heart lotus had no intention of letting him off. A lotus seed the size of a basketball spewed out from the lotus pod, smashing towards the white-winged flying horse and Luo Xian like a cannonball. The typical Buddha heart lotus spewed out lotus seeds that were emerald green in color, but this lotus seed was blood-red like a crystal, as though it was condensed from blood. It instantly arrived in front of Luo Xian. The white-winged flying horse couldn't dodge in time as Luo Xian drew his sword and slashed. With a cold flash, the sword slashed into the blood-colored lotus seed, but before his sword could completely slice through it, Luo Xian's expression changed. Almost instantly, Luo Xian sheathed his sword and got up. With a tap of his toes on the white-winged flying horse's back, he retreated 2 to 3 meters like an eagle. Bam! At the same time, the blood-colored lotus seed exploded, turning into a rain of blood that enveloped the white-winged flying horse. Following that, Zhou and Li Xian saw a terrifying scene. When the blood rain landed on the white-winged flying horse, it was like red-hot metal encountering snow. It instantly melted the white-winged flying horse's flesh. In just a few breaths of time, a large portion of the white-winged flying horse's flesh had melted away, revealing its ghastly white bones. It only had time to let out a miserable neigh before it fell into the lotus pond. No matter how one looked at it, it was impossible for it to survive. Little White! Luo Xian shouted in grief and indignation, but it was useless, and he was still in danger. He was still at least 500 to 600 meters away from the shore. The white-winged Pegasus was already dead, and he definitely didn't have the ability to fly. This lotus pond, which was 500 to 600 meters wide, was no different from hell to him. Even if Zhou and Li Xian wanted to help, they were helpless. They didn't have any flying companion beasts or invincible Vajra bodies. All they could do was watch helplessly from the side. Just when the two of them thought that Luo Xian was dead for sure, they saw Luo Xian tap the tip of his foot on the lotus leaf. As if he was weightless, he borrowed the force to rise up and step onto another lotus leaf. That pretty boy actually has some tricks up his sleeve. He even knows a primordial energy skill that's related to alacrity, Li Xian exclaimed softly. Zhou was intrigued when he saw Luo Xian leaping onto the lotus leaf. The fragile lotus leaf only swayed gently without being snapped by him. Is there a place in Sunset College's dimensional zone that produces alacrity primordial energy skills? Zhou asked Li Xian. Of course. The most famous place is Dragon Gate Grotto, Li Xian said. Zhou was already planning on making a trip to Dragon Gate Grotto when he had the chance. If he could download Dragon Gate Grotto as a game dungeon, he could grind for alacrity primordial energy skills without fear. Such primordial energy skills seemed very useful. Even if he couldn't beat his opponent, he could still escape. Bam! Bam! Luo Xian used the lotus leaf to leap, but before he could jump far, he heard the sound of cannonballs being fired. Then, he saw more than a dozen blood-colored lotus seeds enveloping him, sealing off all his escape routes, leaving him with no room to dodge. Although Luo Xian still had half a sword remnant in his hand, the sword was useless against the blood-colored lotus seeds. After slicing them apart, the might of their explosions would be even stronger. Gritting his teeth, the clothes on Luo Xian's back tore apart, revealing a blue ox tattoo. In the next second, the blue ox tattoo tore out of his body, transforming into a blue bull companion beast that appeared in front of Luo Xian, blocking the blood-colored lotus seed. With the blue ox's shield, Luo Xian finally found a chance of survival. At the critical moment, he rushed out of the blood-colored lotus seed's encirclement. However, the blue ox companion beast was in a tragic state. It was stained by the blood from the explosion of the blood-colored lotus seeds. Its flesh and blood corroded as it fell into the pool with a tragic cry. That pretty boy Luo Xian sure is rich. He actually has 2 mortal companion beasts. Unfortunately, even so, he won't be able to escape death. He's just too far from the shore, Li Xian said with a shake of his head. Zhou ignored Li Xian as he stared at the lotus pond. The white-winged flying horse and the blue ox had fallen into the lotus pond. Their flesh and blood had corroded, reducing them to a pile of bones at the bottom of the pond. This terrifying scene made Zhou recall his mutated skeleton ant. The lotus pond and the Buddha heart lotus's blood seemed to only corrode flesh and blood. The bones weren't corroded. Then, could the mutated skeleton ant, whose entire body had been reduced to bones, survive in the lotus pond? After some thought, Zhou summoned the mutated skeleton ant and ordered it to approach the lotus pond. Then, he extended one of its claws into the lotus pond's water. The mutated skeleton ant flew out from the back of Zhou's hand. It looked like it was made of blood-stained bones, and its body was covered in bone spikes. Now, it was much larger than its evolved body. It resembled a skeleton tank, looking even more ferocious and terrifying than in-game. Holy sh*t, what companion beast is this? Li Xian was given a fright by the mutated skeleton ant's sudden appearance. Only then did he react and realize that it was Zhou's companion beast. Skeleton ant, Zhou answered casually as he controlled the skeleton ant to extend one of its claws into the lotus pond. What are you doing? Li Xian jumped in fright. However, Li Xian soon realized that the skeleton ant's claws were completely fine when it reached into the water. It wasn't corroded by the lotus pond's water. Only then did Zhou confirm that his guess was right. The mutated skeleton ant that had transformed into bones wasn't afraid of the lotus pond's water. With a thought, the mutated skeleton ant slowly entered the lotus pond. Its body came into contact with the pond's water, but nothing happened. Clearly, the pond's water had no effect on it. Chapter 45. Li Xian watched as the mutated skeleton ant crawled across the surface of the water with his mouth agape. Luo Xian quickly leaped across the lotus leaf, but the Buddha heart lotus's second volley of lotus seeds shot at him, leaving him no room to dodge. Furthermore, even if he could dodge the second volley, His primordial energy wouldn't be able to sustain his constant usage of primordial energy skills. If he fell into the lotus pond, he would still be doomed. Luo Xian, land on that ant's back. Suddenly, Luo Xian heard a voice coming from the shore. Luo Xian had no idea who was speaking, nor was he in the mood to care. He tried his best to dodge most of the blood-colored lotus seeds, but there was one that he couldn't avoid. All he could do was grit his teeth and block it with his sword. He knew that his actions were meaningless. The blood-colored lotus seed would still explode when it struck the remnant sword, and he would still be corroded into a pool of blood. However, his survival instincts made him choose to do so. Before the remnant sword struck the blood-colored lotus seed, Luo Xian suddenly saw a blood-colored figure flash over his head. A gigantic and ferocious ant leaped over his head and slammed into the blood-colored lotus seed. The blood-colored lotus seed exploded on the ant's head, drenching it. However, the ferocious-looking ant didn't seem to feel anything. It landed on the surface of the water and quickly moved its 6 claws before crawling towards Luo Xian. Luo Xian was alarmed, imagining that the ant was going to attack him. However, recalling the voice from before and connecting it to the ant's action of blocking the blood-colored lotus seed, he immediately came to a realization. With a tap of his foot on the lotus leaf, he jumped onto the mutated skeleton ant's back. The mutated skeleton ant crawled across the surface of the water at a speed much faster than Luo Xian's jumping. By the time the Buddha Heart Lotus launched its third volley, it had already charged out of the blood-colored lotus seed's attack range. The mutated skeleton ant rushed to the shore and stopped in front of Zhou. Luo Xian jumped off the mutated skeleton ant's back. No matter how dumb he was, he could tell that the mutated skeleton ant was Zhou Wen's companion beast. The person who had warned him was likely Zhou Wen. "My name is Luo Xian. I'll definitely repay you for saving my life in the future. What's your name?" Luo Xian asked. "My name is Zhou Wen. He's Li Xian. We're classmates, so there's no need to take it to heart," Zhou Wen said casually. "Zhou Wen, I'll remember you." Luo Xian sized up Zhou Wen's appearance seriously before turning to leave. "This fellow is already in such a sorry state, but he still has that cocky look on his face. It really pisses me off." Li Xian couldn't stand Luo Xian. However, in the blink of an eye, Li Xian was delighted again. He chuckled and said, "Without the white-winged flying horse, let's see how this fellow can act cool in school in the future." Zhou Wen ignored him and sized up the gigantic Buddha Heart Lotus in the middle of the lotus pond, secretly guessing if it was a legendary dimensional creature. "Zhou Wen, that skeleton ant of yours does have some tricks up its sleeve. It seems to be able to counter that strange Buddha Heart Lotus. Why don't you let it try and see if it can kill the Buddha Heart Lotus? If it succeeds, you might be able to obtain something good," Li Xian said as he looked at the Buddha Heart Lotus. "Forget it. That Buddha Heart Lotus is very odd. I only have one companion beast, so it's best I don't take the risk." Zhou Wen planned on using the game to grind the underground Buddha City dungeon. In-game, companion beasts could be revived, but if they died in real life, they would really be dead. Why take such a huge risk? You are good at everything, but you lack the passion a young man should have. What's there to be afraid of? It's just a companion beast. At most, I'll think of a way to get another one in the future. If I can kill that strange Buddha Heart Lotus now, who knows, a special companion beast might drop. Wouldn't that be great? Li Xian said gloomily. "I don't like gambling." Zhou Wen shook his head and turned to leave. Li Xian could only follow Zhou Wen back helplessly. It wasn't easy for him to obtain 2 passes through his connections, but he didn't even kill a single dimensional creature after coming to Buddha City. Now, he had to return. "Why don't we head to that strange place to take a look?" Li Xian suggested, unwilling to return just like that. "You have a legendary companion beast to protect your life, but I don't. Besides, I don't wish to risk my life." Zhou Wen walked back without looking back. "You don't have any adventurous spirit." Li Xian shrugged his shoulders and left Buddha City with Zhou. Li Xian grumbled the entire way that Zhou was too timid, but Zhou ignored him. After returning to Li Xian's house, he went straight to his room and activated underground Buddha City. When the blood-colored avatar entered underground Buddha City, it was identical to the one Zhou saw. Zhou took out the map he had gotten from Li Xian and gamed according to the map. It didn't take long for him to find the lotus pond. It was different from reality. In reality, the Buddha heart lotuses near the shore had all been slain by the student. Only the depths of the lotus pond had Buddha heart lotuses. But in-game, the pond was filled with Buddha heart lotuses. Not only were there in the middle of the pond, but there were also many around it. However, he didn't see the gigantic Buddha heart lotus. To prevent the blood-colored avatar from dying, Zhou didn't let it enter the lotus pond. All he did was summon the mutated skeleton ant and make it charge at a Buddha heart lotus that was closer to the shore. The mutated skeleton ant's sharp front claws sliced the emerald green lotus seeds that the Buddha heart lotus spewed out into two. The claws didn't stop as they sliced the Buddha heart lotus into two. Killed mortal dimensional creature, Buddha heart lotus. The system notification appeared, but nothing dropped. Zhou ordered the mutated skeleton ant to storm into the lotus pond, slaying any Buddha heart lotus it saw. After slaying more than 30 Buddha heart lotuses, a dimensional crystal finally dropped. However, when Zhou took a careful look, he realized that it was a Constitution 2-dimensional crystal. All it could do was replenish his expended primordial energy and nothing else. While Zhou was crazily slaying the Buddha heart lotuses, the news of the gigantic Buddha heart lotus appearing in the lotus pond had already spread throughout Sunset College. Many students who hadn't left the college during the holidays rushed to the lotus pond when they heard the news. There was no lack of powerful legendary stage students. Everyone wanted to slay the gigantic Buddha heart lotus, but the outcome was shocking. A legendary stage student released a legendary golden-eyed condor companion beast in an attempt to slay the Buddha heart lotus in midair. However, it was struck down by the Buddha heart lotus and nearly fell into the lotus pond. All its feathers were corroded to the point of falling off. Thankfully, the golden-eyed condor's owner had reacted in time and allowed the golden-eyed condor to retreat. However, it was left half dead. It wasn't an easy task to fully recover. Chapter 46. Ding! In the underground Buddha City dungeon, Zhou had slain countless Buddha heart lotuses before finally dropping a Buddha heart lotus crystal. Zhou was somewhat disappointed. After working hard for most of the night, the sky was almost bright, but not a single Buddha heart lotus companion egg had dropped. The dimensional crystals he had obtained were useless as well. Only this Buddha heart lotus crystal might be of some use. Li Xian didn't tell Zhou what primordial energy skill the Buddha heart lotus had, but from its ability to spew out lotus seeds, it was likely a hidden weapon-type primordial energy skill. Primordial energy skills at the mortal stage basically didn't have the ability to release primordial energy. Even at the legendary stage, only a few primordial energy skills could achieve the effect of releasing primordial energy. Primordial energy skills at the mortal stage basically didn't have the ability to release primordial energy. Even at the legendary stage, only a few primordial energy skills could achieve the effect of releasing primordial energy. After directly absorbing the Buddha heart lotus crystal, a strange force quickly entered Zhou Wen's body from the phone. The Buddha heart lotus crystal's power was different from the crystals Zhou Wen had absorbed in the past. Its power was extremely gentle, like warm spring water being injected into his body. It slowly flowed through his body and finally into his heart, causing his heartbeat to become stronger. Absorbed Buddha heart lotus crystal. Attained primordial energy skill. Heart meditation, rank 7. Zhou Wen attempted to use heart meditation, but he felt a warm current emanate from his heart and spread throughout his body. It made him feel warm all over, but it didn't seem to have any other effect. It's no wonder Li Xian only mentioned how powerful the Buddha Heart Lotus Companion Beast was without mentioning its primordial energy skill. It's indeed useless. Zhou didn't mind as he continued commanding the mutated skeleton ant to slay the Buddha Heart Lotus. Just as he was in the mood to commit suicide, he suddenly heard a boom. The nearby pool water spewed out more than 100 feet high as a gigantic Buddha Heart Lotus with a seated blood Buddha on its petals burst out of the water. Before the mutated skeleton ant could take action, the blood-colored Buddha Heart Lotus spewed out more than 10 blood-colored lotus seeds that enveloped the mutated skeleton ant. Relying on the fact that the mutated skeleton ant wasn't afraid of the blood's corrosion, Zhou ordered the mutated skeleton ant to charge at the blood-colored lotus seed. The blood-colored lotus seeds smashed onto the mutated skeleton ant, causing large amounts of blood to splatter all over its body. Unfortunately, they failed to deal it any damage. The mutated skeleton ant rapidly charged at the blood-colored Buddha Heart Lotus and leaped up when it was about 5 to 6 meters away from it. Its sawtooth-like claws slashed at the stem in a crisscross manner. According to Zhou observations, the Buddha Heart Lotus's physique wasn't very strong. Even if it was a legendary creature, with the mutated skeleton ant's strength and talent, there was a chance of cleaving off its stem. Just as the mutated skeleton ant was about to rush in front of the Buddha Heart Lotus, the Buddha Heart Lotus suddenly opened its petals like a strange mouth that devoured the mutated skeleton ant. The petals contracted and turned into a budding state. Skeleton ant heaven mutated one had point Zhou almost of the mutated soul. One had but when he saw the one God, the skeleton heart, he had one saint, one had one of the Buddha. What a terrifying Buddha Heart Lotus! Zhou couldn't help but sigh. Without the mutated skeleton ant, Zhou no longer had the ability to enter the lotus pond to slay the Buddha Heart Lotus. Although companion beasts could be revived in-game, it required the companion beast and the blood-colored avatar to be revived together. This meant that when Zhou used a drop of blood to produce the blood-colored avatar, the companion beast would be revived as well. But now, the blood-colored avatar wasn't dead. It would be a waste to send it to its death. Zhou looked at the map Li Xian had given him before controlling the blood-colored avatar to head for the restricted zone the military had marked out. Since he was going to die, he might as well head there to take a look and see what mysteries lay. The ancient, dark, and damp underground Buddha city was filled with dilapidated walls. There were also plenty of sand and rocks that had tumbled to the ground. When he approached the restricted zone, Zhou saw a stone bridge. Typical stone bridges had carvings of flowers, plants, birds, and beasts, but this stone bridge was carved with colorful fairies. The so-called fairies referred to immortals flying in the sky. The fairies were in the form of young women. Their clothes fluttered in the wind, making them look extremely graceful. After comparing it to the map, Zhou quickly determined that he would reach the restricted zone the military had marked out after crossing the stone bridge. The soldiers had inexplicably died on the other side of the bridge. Zhou was only gaming, so he naturally didn't have any qualms. He controlled the blood-colored avatar to step onto the stone bridge. He didn't discover anything out of the ordinary. It was as though it was an extremely ordinary stone bridge. The blood-colored avatar easily crossed the stone bridge and arrived on the other side. It was impossible to tell what the other side of the bridge looked like. Both sides were filled with rocks, and there was only a narrow stone gap that allowed one person to pass through. He could vaguely see a flickering flame at the end of the stone gap. It was likely a torch or an oil lamp. Zhou carefully sized up the stone gap and didn't discover anything out of the ordinary. All he could do was control the blood-colored avatar to walk into the stone gap and head for the source of the light. The stone gap gradually led upwards. Only then did Zhou realize that there were actually stone steps beneath his feet. However, due to the soil and gravel, the stone steps had been buried. After walking for a while, he could see the exposed stone step. After walking for a few hundred meters, he didn't discover any danger. However, Zhou didn't dare be careless. He kept observing the stone walls on both sides and the stone steps beneath his feet. However, nothing happened the entire way. Instead, the flame gradually became clearer. With the help of the flame, Zhou could vaguely see a magnificent mountain gate. There was a plaque above the mountain gate. It was somewhat dilapidated, and the red paint on it was almost gone. The words were already very blurry. At such a distance, it was impossible to read them clearly. Zhou controlled the blood-colored avatar to gradually approach the mountain gate. Soon he saw the words "Small Buddha Temple" written on the mountain gate. What small Buddha temple? Zhou was slightly surprised. He had only heard of large Buddha temple, but he had never heard of a small Buddha temple. Just as Zhou was pondering over it, he suddenly saw the game screen turn black. Clearly, the blood-colored avatar had died. How did it die? Zhou couldn't help but frown. He kept staring at the blood-colored avatar, but he didn't discover how it had died. He dripped his blood to revive again, allowing the blood-colored avatar to enter underground Buddha City. First, he went to the lotus pond. After luring out the blood-colored Buddha heart lotus, the mutated skeleton ant was killed. The blood-colored avatar went to small Buddha temple again, but it still died for some baffling reason on the stone steps in front of the mountain gate. Zhou widened his eyes as he watched carefully. However, he couldn't tell how the blood-colored avatar had died under his nose. Chapter 47. Of course, this was only the feeling the blood-colored avatar gave Zhou. His organs hadn't really shrunk. Strange, I didn't see any dimensional creatures appear. There's not even a single blade of grass near the stone crevice. What could have killed the blood-colored avatar? It's no wonder even the army is helpless here. This place is really strange. Zhou wanted to continue grinding the lotus pond and small Buddha temple, but he heard a knock on the door. "Zhou, are you up?" Li Xian's voice sounded from outside. Only then did Zhou realize that the sky had already lit up. He had unknowingly spent the night playing. Time had passed too quickly. "The door isn't locked," Zhou said. Li Xian pushed the door open and saw Zhou playing on his phone. Furthermore, there were dark circles under his eyes and his hair was messy. He couldn't help but say in surprise, "Don't tell me you gamed all night? If you have something to say, say it. Don't disturb my sleep," Zhou said as he put down his phone. He still planned on sleeping for a while, but in the past, sleeping was a form of rest for him. Now, sleeping was a form of torture for him. The feeling of being pinned down wasn't pleasant. Furthermore, there was a devil-like murmuring that didn't stop the entire night. Only Zhou could focus on ignoring the soul-stirring murmurs and barely withstand the pressure. If it were anyone else who was tortured like this every day, they would probably go mad. Even Zhou subconsciously refused to sleep, so he unknowingly gamed so crazily. Sunset College's school starts much earlier than the average university. In a few days we will officially start school. If nothing unexpected happens, we might even have a chance to watch a good show after school, Li Xian said with a chuckle. "What good show?" Zhou asked. Li Xian said mysteriously, "I heard that many legendary students in the top 20 of Sunset College went to the Lotus Pond in a bid to slay the gigantic Buddha heart lotus. However, not only did they fail, they even lost quite a number of legendary companion beasts. Now they are actively buying flying pets. We should be able to make it in time for the battle. Sunset College and the military have epic experts. Why don't they directly send them to destroy the Buddha heart lotus?" Zhou asked in puzzlement. If all the problems are solved, how are they going to nurture the next generation? The League has a rule that these resources are reserved for future flowers like us. If it's not for special circumstances, the military and schools won't interfere, Li Xian said. After a pause, Li Xian said, "I originally wanted to invite you out for breakfast, but from the looks of it, you probably want to sleep. Then, I'll go by myself. After Li Xian left, Zhou lay in bed to sleep. Just like usual, he quickly fell asleep. The feeling of being pinned down by a ghost descended on him at the same time. The devilish murmurs kept ringing in his ears like flies that couldn't be chased away. Zhou ignored the discomfort in his body, nor did he listen to the voice. All he wanted to do was sleep, but it was difficult for him to sleep as soundly as before. After sleeping for 4 to 5 hours, he was woken up by his phone's ringtone. He felt a little better. Feng Ruoxi? Zhou glanced at the caller ID and saw that it was Feng Ruoxi. Zhou, long time no see. I heard you applied for Sunset College. Is that true? Feng Ruoxi's voice sounded. Yes, Zhou answered. That's good. Feng Ruoxi seemed to heave a sigh of relief. What do you mean? Zhou didn't know what Feng Ruoxi meant. Nothing. I still have something to do. I'll hang up first. Feng Ruoxi's voice sounded a lot happier. With that said, she hung up. Ridiculous. Zhou looked at his phone speechlessly. Just as he was about to put down his phone, it rang again. This time, it was Zhou Lingfeng. Dad. Zhou had no choice but to pick up the call. Zhou Lingfeng's voice sounded. Son, you should be in Luoyang now, right? I'm in Luoyang. Why? Zhou had an ominous feeling. Little Lan wants to treat you to a meal. Let's have a family gathering, Zhou Lingfeng said with a smile. I'm doing pretty well here. You guys are doing pretty well, so there's no need to forcefully stick together, right? Zhou said with a frown. After all, we will be family in the future. It's only right to get to know each other. Besides, Little Lan really wants to meet you. Just give me some face and have a meal. Zhou Lingfeng had no intention of giving up. Zhou pondered for a moment before saying, All right then. What time and where? That place isn't easy to find. Where are you? I'll get someone to pick you up, Zhou Lingfeng said. Zhou gave an address. He didn't mention Li Xian's house, only the name of a nearby street. All right, wait a moment. I'll get someone to pick you up. Zhou Lingfeng hung up after saying that. Zhou didn't know when the person Zhou Lingfeng called would arrive. All he could do was get out of bed, wash up, and head out. When he came to the road he had pointed out, he squatted by the side of the road and continued gaming when he saw that no one was there. This time, Zhou didn't continue grinding underground Buddha City. Instead, he chose the iron ant nest. He wanted to see if he had a chance of killing the silver-winged flying ant. Before he found the silver-winged flying ant, he heard the screech of brake. An off-road vehicle had stopped by the side of the road. When Zhou looked up, he happened to see a snow-white, smooth, and slender leg extend out from the opened car door. Then, he saw a familiar face. And Jing? Zhou never expected Zhou Lingfeng to get Jing to pick him up. He was slightly taken aback. And Jing glanced at Zhou phone and couldn't help but frown when she saw the game screen. She sized up Zhou body and her expression turned colder. You didn't cultivate the sun strafe art? I was just about to ask you. I called my dad, but he said he didn't give me the sun strafe art. Zhou controlled the blood-colored avatar to find a safe zone before exiting the game and asking Jing. I gave you the sun strafe art to harm you, Jing said with a cold expression. Jing said with a cold expression before getting into the car. Without turning her head, she said, Are you getting in or not? Zhou never expected Jing to be so direct. He was momentarily unsure if she was telling the truth. However, since she was already here and he had already promised Zhou Lingfeng, there was naturally no reason for him to return. Zhou opened the door and sat in the front passenger seat. I'll return this to you. Zhou took out the USB drive that contained the sun strafe art. Chapter 48. I never take back things I give away. If I don't want it, I'll just delete it and throw it away, Jing said without turning her head as she drove. Zhou placed the USB drive back into his pocket when he heard that. A USB drive wasn't worth much, so there was no need to return it to Njing. Although he didn't know if the sun-strafe art in it was real or fake, it was just as Njing had said. He could just delete it. Without a word on the way, Njing quickly drove him to a spot. Zhou originally believed that Li Xian was a tycoon just from living in a villa, but when he saw this, he realized what it meant to be a real tycoon. This place was like a park, and Njing drove the car in. Amidst the exquisite and elegant garden, there were quite a number of modern-style buildings. However, they perfectly blended in with the surrounding garden. They were in picturesque disorder, clearly designed by a famous designer. In front of a 3-story building, Njing stopped the car and led Zhou into the building through the main entrance. Just as he entered the hall, he saw a mature and elegant woman sitting on the sofa with Zhou Lingfeng. Zhou sized up the woman and saw that she resembled the photo Zhou Lingfeng had sent. She was likely Ouyanglan, but she was prettier and more elegant in person than in the photo. She looked to be in her 30s. "Hello, Auntie." Zhou took the initiative to greet her. Firstly, he didn't want to put Zhou Lingfeng in a difficult position. Secondly, he wanted to make it clear that he had no intention of acknowledging Ouyanglan as his mother. "Little one, you're here. You're much more handsome in person than in the photo. It's just that you don't look too good. I happened to cook some ginseng soup. Have some later to nourish yourself." Ouyanglan got up and pulled Zhou by the hand to the sofa. "Thank you, Auntie." Although Zhou didn't have a high EQ, he wasn't foolish enough to reject Ouyanglan's kind intentions. All he wanted was to successfully finish the meal and return to gaming. He wanted to see if he could kill the silver-winged flying ant. Ouyanglan was clearly the type of person with a high EQ. Even though it was their first time meeting, Zhou didn't feel any distance between them. It was as though they had known each other for a long time. Zhou originally believed that Zhou Lingfeng was someone with a glib tongue, but when he was with Ouyanglan, Zhou Lingfeng appeared somewhat stiff. It left Zhou alarmed. "These are fresh persimmons that were just delivered. Xiao Jing, you like eating persimmons the most. Try them first. They're very sweet." Ouyanglan seemed to feel that she had neglected Njing by the side. She personally picked up a rosy and alluring persimmon and handed it to Njing. Njing took the persimmon, peeled it, and took a bite. It was indeed sweet. "Here, have another one." Seeing Njing finish eating, Ouyanglan gave her another one. Njing took the persimmon and deliberately glanced at Zhou. Although she didn't say a word, Zhou understood what she meant. A biological mother is a biological mother. Njing seemed to be saying that because Ouyanglan didn't give a persimmon to Zhou, Zhou didn't mind. Ouyanglan was Njing's biological mother, so it was normal for her to dote on Njing. There was no need for him to be jealous. Furthermore, he had no intention of integrating into the family, so there was naturally no reason for him to mind. While Ouyanglan was chatting with Zhou, a butler-like person came over and said, "Madam, dinner is ready. You must be hungry after waiting for so long. Eat more later." Ouyanglan pulled Zhou to the dining room and even got him to sit beside her. Instead, Njing could only sit at a seat further away. Zhou saw that the dishes on the table looked, smelled, and looked great. He had never seen many of them before, but there was a huge lobster that Zhou recognized at a glance. Ever since the dimensional storms, most of the sea had become a dimensional zone. The creatures inside had mutated, so it was much harder to eat seafood than before. Zhou had only read about lobsters in history books, biology books, and the internet. He had never seen the real thing, much less eaten it. It was especially so in an inland area like Guide City. It was almost impossible to eat seafood, much less such a huge lobster. "This lobster was just flown in this morning. I even made it myself. Little Jing loves this kind of lobster the most," Ouyanglan said. As there was only one lobster, Zhou believed that Ouyanglan was telling him to be tactful and not snatch the lobster from Njing. Njing was somewhat touched when she heard that. Her frosty face finally revealed a smile as she gave Zhou Wen a provocative look. However, Ouyang Lan said with a look of regret, however, seafood like lobster can't be eaten with persimmons. Otherwise, it will cause diarrhea and, in serious cases, food poisoning. And Jing just ate a persimmon, so I'll leave this lobster to you, little one. Have a taste of my culinary skills. With that said, Ouyang Lan placed the lobster on Zhou Wen's plate. Instantly, Jing, who was about to grab the lobster, froze. Zhou Wen wore a look of shock. It's on purpose. It's definitely on purpose. No matter how Zhou Wen looked at it, Ouyang Lan had deliberately given Jing a persimmon. It was clearly a trap. It was no wonder Zhou Wen found it odd. With Ouyang Lan's high EQ, there were several persimmons on the plate. It wasn't like Jing could finish them all by herself, so why wouldn't she give one to Zhou Wen? Is this really Jing's biological mother? Zhou Wen looked at the elegant Ouyang Lan with her bright eyes and white teeth, his mind filled with questions. Regardless, Ouyang Lan seemed to treat Zhou Wen very well. If one didn't know them, they would think that Ouyang Lan was Zhou Wen's biological mother and Jing was the burden of his ex-wife. Jing's expression didn't look too good, but it was obvious that her upbringing wasn't bad. Despite feeling aggrieved, she didn't leave in anger. Instead, she waited until the end of the meal. However, she was in a rather bad mood, so she only ate a little. Zhou Wen finally understood what it meant to feel at home, to feel like a spring breeze, and to feel like returning home. Even someone as slow and distant as Zhou Wen had to admit that Ouyang Lan was indeed someone who made it difficult for others to feel ill will. He was even very willing to be close to her. Little one, I heard that you were admitted to Sunset College. You must have suffered a lot, right? It's not easy for students from other places to be admitted to Sunset College. I don't have much to give you, so treat this as a greeting gift. After the meal, just as Zhou Wen was about to bid farewell and leave, Ouyang Lan handed him a card. Zhou Wen originally imagined that it was something like a bank card. Just as he was about to reject it, he heard Ouyang Lan say, "This is Sunset College's dorm card. It's the kind with a single room. I heard from Ling Feng that you like peace and quiet, so I got the principal to prepare one. After you matriculate, just stay in the dorm according to the card number. You have to accept this small gift. Don't make me think that this gift was prepared too casually, all right?" "Thank you, Auntie. I like this gift very much." Zhou Wen thought for a moment before accepting the gift. Since Ouyang Lan had expressed her goodwill, he didn't wish to be the bad guy. A dorm card was nothing. Furthermore, a single room was indeed very useful to Zhou Wen. Ouyang Lan's gift made Zhou Wen's impression of her rise. Even giving her a gift made him feel comfortable. Ouyang Lan was truly a meticulous person. By the way, don't call me Auntie in the future. Am I that old? Just call me Sis Lan in the future, Ouyang Lan said with a faint smile. Chapter 49. When he left the Yin family, a chauffeur drove him back. He didn't see Jing again. Why is Ouyang Lan deliberately currying favor with me? With the Yin family's power, there's no need for her to do so. Zhou Wen saw that the Yin family's yard was guarded by regular troops. There weren't many families in Luoyang with such power. It didn't make sense that Ouyang Lan wanted to build a good relationship with him because of his relationship with Zhou Lingfeng. After all, even Zhou Lingfeng was letting him live. There was no need for Ouyang Lan to do something so troublesome. Unable to figure it out, Zhou Wen stopped thinking about it. After all, he was just a poor kid. Ouyang Lan wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. When he returned to Li Xian's villa, Li Xian wasn't at home. He hadn't seen Li Xian at home for the past few days. Zhou Wen sat on the sofa and took out his phone to restart the ant nest dungeon. As the blood-colored avatar had exited the game without dying, he didn't need to waste a drop of blood to enter the game. The blood-colored avatar appeared at the spot where it had previously exited. There were quite a number of vigor ants crawling around. Zhou Wen summoned the mutated skeleton ant and got the blood-colored avatar to ride it as it charged forward. The mutated skeleton ant was just too powerful. Ignoring ordinary vigor ants, even mutated vigor ants would be cleaved into two with a single claw. He charged forward unstoppably, and after killing a mutated vigor ant, Zhou Wen heard a ding. He imagined that a dimensional crystal had dropped, but on careful look, it was a mutated vigor ant egg. Discovered mutated vigor ant egg. Compatibility with mutated skeleton ant, 73%. Fuse? Zhou Wen chose no because the previous fusion didn't have much of an effect. Perhaps this fusion would make the mutated skeleton ant weaker, so he didn't make the attempt. After Zhou Wen chose no, the mutated vigor ant egg automatically entered incubation mode. Zhou Wen felt his primordial energy flow towards the companion egg. The incubation this time was very smooth. There was no primordial energy draining. Zhou Wen glanced at the stats in-game and saw that he had 2 points of primordial energy left. After the mutated vigor ant egg hatched, it transformed into an ant tattoo that appeared on the back of Zhou Wen's right hand. Perhaps because there was already a mutated skeleton ant on the back of his left hand, it could only choose his right hand. Mutated vigor ant. Mortal strength, 7 speed, 4 constitution, 7 essence energy, 2 innate skill. Divine strength fist, stage 2, companion form, boxing glove. This mutated vigor ant's stats are much worse than the first one. It's no longer of much use to me. Unfortunately, I can't take out the items obtained in-game. Otherwise, it would be better to sell the companion egg. Zhou Wen felt somewhat depressed. Although he was depressed, the harvest was still gratifying. After all, mortal companion beasts were rare to begin with. As he had expended too much primordial energy, he didn't directly seek out the silver-winged flying ant. Instead, he circled the vicinity and killed a large number of vigor ants, dropping primordial energy crystals to replenish his expended primordial energy. After replenishing his primordial energy to 10 points, he headed for the silver-winged flying ant. When it saw the silver-winged flying ant from afar, it flapped its wings and flew over. It was so fast that it left afterimages on the game screen. Without any hesitation, Zhou Wen summoned the mutated vigor ant and got it to deal with the nearby ordinary ants. As for the mutated skeleton ant, it was summoned by Zhou Wen in its companion form. Blood-stained white bones appeared on Zhou Wen's left arm like an exoskeleton. They wrapped around his entire left arm, forming a hideous bone bracer. Not only did the bracer provide protection, but there were also many bone spikes on it, making it look hideous and terrifying. Almost at the same time the bracer took form, Zhou Wen felt a surge of energy surge into his left arm. It made the strength he had gathered in his left arm even more robust. He had the urge to shatter a boulder with a single punch. The silver-winged flying ant arrived in a blink of an eye as its transparent silver wings flapped rapidly. It drew an arc in the air like a silver bolt of lightning as its claws stabbed straight at the blood-colored avatar's chest. It wasn't the first time Zhou Wen had fought the silver-winged flying ant, so he knew it like the back of his hand. Upon seeing the silver-winged flying ant's actions, he knew where it wanted to attack. Before it struck out with its claws, he had already sidestepped. At the same time, his left hand, which was wrapped in the bone bracer, struck out with ashen palm at the instant he crossed paths with the silver-winged flying ant. At such a close distance, with ashen palm's explosive speed, Zhou Wen believed that he was in the bag, but to his surprise, the 4 transparent silver wings on the silver-winged flying ant's back emitted a silver stream of light. The silver-winged flying ant, which was already extremely fast, had its speed increased significantly. At such a close distance, Zhou Wen's ashen palm failed to catch up to the silver-winged flying ant's flying speed. It barely touched its body. Instead, the silver-winged flying ant's claws stabbed straight into the blood-colored avatar's chest, preventing it from even having a chance to struggle. It died on the spot. A flying-type primordial energy skill? Looking at the black screen, Zhou didn't feel depressed. Instead, he felt even more excited. In the past, the silver-winged flying ant had never used a primordial energy skill, but this time, he had forced it to use one. This gave Zhou an opportunity. After all, primordial energy skills required the support of primordial energy. It was impossible for the silver-winged flying ant to use it constantly. As long as Zhou thought of a way to last a little longer, it wouldn't be impossible for him to slay it. Furthermore, the silver-winged flying ant had a flying-type primordial energy skill. This was undoubtedly good news for Zhou. Flying-type primordial energy skills were rare to begin with, but they were very useful. With something to look forward to, Zhou worked even harder. He used a syringe to draw blood and dripped a drop on the phone screen, reviving the blood-colored avatar and returning to battle. When he came in front of the silver-winged flying ant again, Zhou lasted another 3 seconds. When he came in front of the silver-winged flying ant for the third time, Zhou used his positioning and ashen palm to threaten it, successfully dodging 2 of its primordial energy skills. Zhou exchanged his repeated deaths for combat experience as he got closer and closer to killing the silver-winged flying ant. Finally, Zhou was certain that the silver-winged flying ant could only use 2 primordial energy skills. This was its limit. As long as Zhou could dodge the 2 greatest threats, he had a chance of killing it. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.